I'm going to turn it over to Brooke Mcdonald, who's the president and CEO of the Conservation Foundation.
Thank you, Jan, and welcome everyone. I always look forward to this event every year. We have such really good speakers this year, and the topics are very, very timely. So I do want to thank all of our speakers for joining us today, and thank all of you for joining us as well. As Jan said, I'm Brooke Mcdonald. I'm the president and CEO for the Conservation Foundation. We are celebrating our 50th anniversary this year at the Conservation Foundation. Our mission focuses mainly in three areas: the preservation and the restoration of land. We've helped preserve about 35,000 acres of land over the past 50 years in 8 different counties in northeastern Illinois. And the second part of our mission is about water, clean water, restoring the water quality in our rivers and streams, restoring the health and the habitat in our rivers and streams, things like removing dams. And we work with a lot of other partners, a lot of other organizations in that area. And the third area focuses mainly on education and community engagement, working with local communities on conservation projects and issues that are meaningful and relevant to them. So those are the 3 mission areas of the Conservation Foundation. And as Jan mentioned, we are a membership supported organization. If you're not a member, I hope you'll consider becoming one, and you can go to our website to learn more about that and become a member of the Conservation Foundation. We work throughout northeastern Illinois, but primarily in DuPage, Kane, Kendall, and Will counties. And I also want to thank Jan. Jan has worked very hard on this seminar today. Jan is our DuPage County Program Director, and many of you probably joined us a month ago when Jan put together our annual DuPage Environmental Summit, which had more than 500 people register for it. So she's been hard at work this winter putting together all of these wonderful training and educational opportunities. And Jan, I wanted to thank you and give you a shout out for all of your hard work. I also want to thank our sponsors. Our sponsors make these events affordable. And by affordable, I mean free. So thank you to all of our sponsors, particularly DuPage County, specifically the DuPage County Stormwater Committee. But I also want to thank Christopher B. Burke Engineering and Bedrock Earthscapes as our 2 other sponsors today. They're sponsoring this event, and they sponsor many other events as well. So thank you to them. We've had a very long and productive relationship with the DuPage County Stormwater Department. Sarah Hunn and Mary Mitros, thank you very much for our wonderful partnership. I think we've been working with you guys for more than 20 years on water quality education and outreach in DuPage County and our streams. In fact, I remember way back in the late 80s, us working with you on the stormwater management ordinance. So our relationship goes back a very long way. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Jim Zay. I guess there's a short video. Jim was unable to join us this morning in person, so there's a short video. Jim is the chairman of the DuPage County Board's Stormwater Management Committee, and I want to thank Jim as well for all of his support and the great partnership that we've had over the past 20 plus years. So with that, Jan, I'll go ahead and show that video.
There's no sound, Jan.
Yeah, Jan, I can't hear him.
Thank you for letting me know. I know what I did. I got to share screen. I didn't optimize video clip, share sound. And I have the video here. Sorry about this. I had it working pulled up and now it's not coming up. Sorry for the technical delay here. I'll get it back up here. It worked yesterday. This is why we do this, and we had practice sessions, but it doesn't seem to be one that worked for me today. Shoot.
Take your time, Jan. We have plenty of time.
I got it.
People are still signing on.
Okay, thanks, Brooke. I got it up now. Hold
Jim
on.
Zay, Chairman of the DuPage County Stormwater Management Committee.
And let me share my screen now because I have it pulled up. Sorry about that. It disappeared again. I have it pulled up here. Let me go back to my Zoom webinar here. Sorry, guys. For some reason, it's not coming up again. I want to share. Let me go back. I don't know why it's doing this to me today. I had to pull it up at the bottom here. This is getting very frustrating. I had to pull it up here and it plays on my screen. It's not showing up on your screen. We started here again.
Jim Zay.
And I am going to minimize it now so that I should be able to share it with you all. Share screen. There we go. Share.
Jim Zay, Chairman of the DuPage County Stormwater Management Committee, and welcome to Beyond Basics 2022. I'd like to begin by thanking all the speakers for giving their time to us today. I'm excited for them to share their expertise. I'd also like to thank the Conservation Foundation for coordinating and hosting this event. They are great partners in DuPage County as we build resilience to reduce flooding impacts and improve the quality of our waterways. I'd also like to thank our sponsors for making the seminar possible, Christopher B. Burke Engineering and Bedrock Earthscapes LLC. It's important for ideas, problem solutions, and lessons learned to be exchanged locally, particularly as we're facing more frequent and intense rain events. We all play an important part in building more resilient communities. As we know, the space needed, the funding available, and the time required for large-scale projects is something hard to come by. So we are tasked with finding more innovative ways to approach stormwater. This can include strategically placed green infrastructure, making existing open space more functional, and interjurisdictional cooperation to manage flooding. Today, we're going to hear presentations that discuss some of these ways to implement stormwater management practices creatively. I hope we can take away some valuable insight from these presentations and use them in the future. Thank you again for joining us, and hopefully next year we'll see you all live and in person. Thank you and have a great day.
So thank you, everyone. Sorry about that. Thank you for your patience. And with that, we're running ahead of schedule, which I hope is okay with everyone, but I'd like to, maybe we have more time for questions at the end. So what I would like to do is now introduce Edith Macra, who is a Director of Environmental Initiatives. And I think that's, I'm sorry, Edith Macra is Director of Environmental Initiatives with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. And recently, so they have a new publication out that she's going to be talking about, and her title of her presentation is Climate Action for the Chicago Region. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Edith and go ahead and start your presentation.
Good morning, everyone. It's really an honor to be here. So thank you so much to the Conservation Foundation, DuPage County Stormwater Management for putting together this event, and then thinking across to the big picture on climate. So I welcome the challenge to put the work that you do conserving natural resources, open space, land, and water into context of climate action. So I am going to start a presentation in which I will be talking about, as Jan mentioned, the climate action plan for the Chicago region that was just completed this past summer and launched. So while I get that together, and let me just check one more time. Is that the appropriate display? Or
yes, it is. Edith, looks
Great.
good.
Okay, excellent. So the climate action plan for the Chicago region. I will talk about the background and context for the plan, how it was put together and why. I'll go at a high level talking about the climate action goals, targets, and objectives. And then I'll go more into detail, even though there are hundreds of strategies. I'll just pick a couple to show you how to navigate the climate action plan and get to know the strategies and use the plan to implement the strategies and tie the work that you do to climate action. Then I'll follow up with some steps that we're taking and invite you also to engage with the CAP and how we're working with communities in supporting the Climate Action Plan, or CAP. And I'll talk a little bit about next steps. So just an introduction. Thank you for the introduction, Jan. I am local. I'm from the Chicago area and have a long career in natural resources. I got involved in working with local governments with Mayor Daley when I was really early in my career. And I'm now a staff member at the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. And if you don't know us, brief introduction here, we're a nonprofit regional council of governments, or we call ourselves COGS. And having a regional conference, council of governments like we are is actually unusual. We are umbrella to 9 member COGS or sub-regional COGS. And many of you might know organizations like the DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference. So 9 COGS plus the city of Chicago make up the leadership of the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. We represent 275 diverse communities in Northeastern Illinois, 8.9 million people. And our purpose, our audience and our members are municipal governments. And our purpose is to foster collaboration across the region and empower local governments. And my role, we're not an environmental organization, although I manage the environmental program. And our primary tool for exactly empowering municipalities and fostering collaboration across the region is a fundamental tool that is now going on its 6th birthday here, called the Greenest Region Compact. And the Greenest Region Compact is a program, it's a coalition, and it's a document that really anchors our sustainable actions in the region and became the foundation and the reason that we were a magnet for a regional climate planning approach. The Greenest Region Compact is first a pledge. There is a set of consensus sustainability goals that municipalities and other partners, local governments, are invited to support through municipal resolution. And we now have 136 municipalities in 4 of the 7 counties in the Chicago region that have formally endorsed the Greenest Region Compact. And there's 10 councils of governments. There's an extra one if you're paying attention. They've all formally endorsed the Greenest Region Compact. The Greenest Region Compact also contains a framework, which is a guide to sustainable actions. It's a tool, and I'll show you a little sample page from it further in the presentation, but it's a tool that enables municipalities to develop sustainability plans. And then more importantly, or most importantly, we are a collaboration. So Greenest Region Compact communities work together to achieve GRC goals. And I'm very happy to see in the audience many of our Greenest Region Compact communities, and welcome those of you that represent communities that are not yet a member of the Greenest Region Compact to join us. And then moving on to the Climate Action Plan and the regional approach. So in the same way that we all came together under the Greenest Region Compact to advance sustainability in our region, as climate crisis was worsening and we had a change in administration, increasing alarm over our level of preparedness for climate in about 2017, 2018, I started to really make some noise about wanting to attract resources for a regional approach to climate action planning. And previously, and still to a large degree, climate action planning at a government level is really the purview of very large governments. There's even an organization called C40 Cities, which was founded to unite the largest 40 cities in the globe, or on the globe, to take action on climate. City of Chicago long had a climate action plan, but there weren't really resources for the hundreds of municipalities that the Mayor's Caucus represents. And unbeknownst to me, as I was starting to make noise about wanting to take a regional approach to climate action planning, across the pond, as it were, the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, which indeed is a global organization, but it is co-funded by the European Union and many philanthropists, including Bloomberg Philanthropies, that provides leadership, guidance, and a framework to mayors around the world to take climate action. And there's a structure for the climate actions plans and resources available to help local governments really understanding that much of the climate action really can be strongly led from the local level. If you look at the world map on the right, you'll see dots. The green dots represent the 10,000 cities around the region. And if you're curious, in Illinois, we have 5, maybe 6 members of the Global Covenant of Mayors. So not super strong here in the US, but the yellow dots represent regions. And these are parts of the world that are united across counties, townships, provinces, to take on climate action strategies and planning at a regional level. So you see that bright cluster of yellow in Europe, and there's some in South America and Oceania, but there was nothing like that happening in the US. So the Global Covenant of Mayors in 2019 were seeking to pioneer the regional climate approach in the US and test the strategies that they use around the world in a United States context. So I applied along with 3 other metro regions to become one of the pilot projects. And there are 4 communities represented on above the United States there. And I will say that only 3 of us succeeded. So the partner organizations that also took on regional climate planning are Kansas City and Metro Washington. And we are the largest of the regions, and we're also the last to finish, but we did indeed finish. We had 16 months to do it. So it was really quite a heavy lift to get it done, but we were mentored by the European Union. We didn't get funding for it, but we had an opportunity to learn from other regional climate approaches. And then we had access to an engineering firm as a consultant that provided some technical assistance to us. So as I said, a 16-month process, and we happily kicked off with great enthusiasm and not a lot of resources in October of 2019, with not as much capacity as one might want to undertake this project. But I was delighted to be able to secure the support of NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which at the same time we were just getting off the ground on the climate action plan for the region. They were launching their US Climate Resilience Toolkit, which is a framework and a process for communities, jurisdictions to develop resiliency plans and to take assessments. So I invited them to pioneer with me on the regional approach, and NOAA accepted the challenge and has been a tremendously strong partner in the climate action plan. It was an area that I felt we were very weak on with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, my skills in particular, and the regional leadership as well. I just didn't feel like we had as much strength in climate adaptation. So NOAA brought huge resources and expertise with us to the project. We also partnered with the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, which the Mayor's Caucus is co-located. We share offices with them, but it's our regional planning agency. And again, tremendous expertise and resources with planning, data analysis, and they are the lead on the greenhouse gas inventories that were fundamental to the climate action plan. We began our stakeholder engagement process, which is really critical for any climate action plan and is a requirement of the Global Covenant of Mayors. And it's the way we do things. We want a good, strong public engagement process, a member engagement process. And we began with some outreach events. And if you're watching the timeline or thinking about the timeline, we've all been living through it. We started this in the fall of 2019 and only got a couple of in-person events, although they were successful and fun. And we did 3 in-person events around the region before the pandemic hit, and we pivoted to an online format, and in all had 7 workshops, both in person and online across the region. Really very proud of the level of stakeholder engagement we were able to get, considering all that was going on in the world. So we had 175 organizations participate in the planning process with us. And of those, 53 of them are municipal members. So while we had both strong support from the municipalities in the region, it's almost more exciting to see that there were so many other organizations, regional organizations, lots of other government organizations, not-for-profit groups that partnered with us because they really wanted to see municipalities succeed, and they really wanted a statement of climate action and some goals set from the region. So a really strong engagement. The other part of the planning process that was just as important was the research that was done to develop strategies, goals, and really design the plan. So the Greenest Region Compact itself is based on an analysis of 30 sustainability plans mostly in our region. But for the purposes of climate action plan, we expanded and looked at every climate action plan we have in the region. And by the way, if you're tracking or counting or wondering, I am aware of 4 municipal level climate action plans in our region. There may be more, but those are the ones that I know about. So mostly we looked outside of our region and we looked across the globe at other regional plans to help us frame out the structure of the climate action plan and get ideas and strategies. So then in creating the climate action plan, or a CAP, research was done. And because of the compressed timeline that we were on, we were really grateful to have in our pockets the greenhouse gas inventory for the Chicago metro region. Again, this was done by CMAP, and this was pre-existing. So we used a 2015 greenhouse gas inventory. And fundamentally, a greenhouse gas inventory really tracks energy usage by sector for whatever jurisdiction you're examining. You can do this for a company, you can do this for a municipality. We did this for the entire region. So this is really utility data, primarily that tells us where the emissions are coming from. And I would encourage you to look at the big pie chart first, which gives you an overview of the region. And although the blue and the green sections are separated, that's the natural gas and electricity usage or contributions to the greenhouse gases in the region. If you put those together, 69% of our emissions in the region are from stationary energy. And what that means, it's non-transportation. So the energy which does not move, and that includes power generation and building energy. So this is really the hot spot in our region that we need to address. The red portion of that is transportation contributions. And you will see, if you look at national climate data and even state level climate data, this is usually flipped. And it's usually a transportation. You'll often hear that cited, that transportation is the major contributor to greenhouse gases. And it's not in our region. And I invite just a moment of your reflection as to why that might be before I tell you the answer, because it's harder to raise hands in a virtual environment. The reason is the climate. We have delightful weather extremes that are very interesting and always exciting in the Chicago region, but we have very high building energy demands for heating and cooling. And that's why we also have a very good transit system in the metro region, which helps justify why the transportation sector is a little bit lower. And then much to I would say a little bit of the disappointment to the activists I work with, who are very enthusiastic and supportive of recycling and waste reduction. The waste contributions, including wastewater, is actually a very small contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, but in the grand scheme of things, every area deserves attention. And so any efficiencies that we can find in managing waste and water is certainly worth addressing, because at a regional scale, these numbers are huge. So if you haven't already, please do look at the more detailed bar chart for a little bit more of a breakdown. And one of the things that I wanted to point out, because I'll talk about it later in the presentation, if you would just pay attention to the residential building sector, and between natural gas and electricity, it's 26% of the emissions. So some surprises here, and it really was worth it for us and exciting for us to take a close look at these greenhouse gas inventory and think about how best to address strategies to reduce it. So this is the underpinning of the climate action plan and the mitigation side. And the greenhouse gas inventory, again, fortunate for us in the Chicago region, and fortunate for us to try to do this climate action plan, that we have a history and some track record for over time for greenhouse gas inventories and analysis. And this is CMAP data. And what we found is a slight dip or a dropping of greenhouse gas emissions from 2005, 2010, 2015. But this is completely falling short of where we need to be. So we are seeing a positive trend in the greenhouse gas emissions reduction. CMAP, if you're wondering, the next inventory should be for 2020, but 2020 was such a strange year. CMAP is going with 2019 for a little bit more normalized analysis, and that is underway. The second critical anchor to the climate action plan is climate risk and vulnerability. So this assessment, also done at a regional level, looks at the impacts and threats from extreme weather events driven by climate change. And there's some analyses that are done. This is an area, again, that in the Chicago region, we have more work to do, but CMAP does have some data on fundamental risks from extreme heat. So the map that you're seeing is land surface temperature, and you'll see hotspots in the region indicated in red that are usually around the most urbanized areas. And of course, this helps us strategically plan investments in green infrastructure, energy efficiency investments, and also looks at vulnerability for populations that are particularly at risk based on where they live and the environment around them. There's also a flood susceptibility index that was utilized in some mapping that was done by CMAP that helped us with the flooding side of the strategy. And because climate risk is felt differently and very much locally, depending on who's impacted, there was a component, this is something that NOAA helped us with, there was a component of engagement and perception. So the chart that you're seeing, that funny little quadrant there, it was an interactive exercise that we used with our stakeholders to help us map out and understand perceptions of threats based on perceived impact and probability for the participants in the workshop. And so this is a particular snapshot of the extreme heat exercise. And we also looked at primary threats that include flooding, extreme heat, drought, and then severe thunderstorms and severe winter weather. And the top three threats, flooding, extreme heat, and drought, were the ones that were really workshopped and analyzed in the climate action plan. And so what that brings us to is now the foundation for climate action planning. And to put that in the context of where we're at in terms of emissions and how we need to adapt and how the plan evolves, if you look at this arc, you will see the orange part represents emissions rising over time. That's an actual chart of the emissions in our region. The center line represents the year of the action plan. And then the blue part represents emissions. Even if we halt emissions in 2022, we will still have persistent greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere that can be with us for decades to come. So we need to adapt. And so how the plan then is structured is to address the greenhouse gas emissions head on is called climate mitigation, and that's the mitigation portion of the plan, all the strategies related to reducing greenhouse gases. And there's a little bit there on sequestration. We didn't really do carbon capture, but sequestration is addressed, or removing carbon from the atmosphere. The next part is adaptation, again, recognizing that climate change is going to be with us for the rest of our lifetimes and our children's lifetimes. And so we need to adapt to those changes that are already underway and anticipated. And finally, the plan is rooted in equity. The plan has a people-centered focus as local governments. This is what we're about, is serving, protecting people. But the plan has a unique opportunity to address historic inequities and to look at resources and opportunities available, particularly through clean technologies that could help to restore some of the historic inequities. And also from an adaptation standpoint, to protect populations that are most vulnerable for various demographic and socioeconomic reasons. So climate mitigation, adaptation, and rooted in equity is how the plan is structured. A unique component of our plan, which makes it a little bit different than other plans in the region, is our strong municipal focus. And I do have to give a shout out. This is one of the things that we can thank for this group learning. The ideas related to these municipal levers I borrowed from Kansas City with their blessing. And so the whole plan is really focused around what local governments can do. And these are primary levers is another way to put them, but this is the authorities or powers that local governments have to take action. And the primary ones, which they're all familiar with, number one is leadership. So demonstrating climate action through municipal operations, local government operations, really is a way of leading climate action at a local level. The next one, which Brooke mentioned as a primary focus for the Conservation Foundation, is really stakeholder engagement, participant engagement. And this is the municipal lever to encourage climate action among constituents. So this is surprisingly powerful, and local governments can be a trusted voice. And you talked about kudos to the village of Downers Grove for a native plant sale. This is one way to encourage sustainable behaviors among residents, but it's those kinds of actions and many others that local governments can have unique influence in terms of climate action. And the last one, more familiar probably, is Enact local plans and policies. And so Enact actually also includes not just plans, policies, ordinances that can be supportive of climate mitigation and adaptation, but also to support policies at a state and federal level as well. So these are the three primary levers, and you will see them used throughout the plan. And then why is this, or why is it impactful looking at a municipally focused climate action plan for the region? And if you look across all possible levels and how we can really leverage individual actions through municipal government, working together as a region, influencing state and federal policies for global climate impact. So that's the strategy, and that's why a regional approach is powerful, and that's really what the European Union wanted to see us try to do in the Chicago region with this plan. So now into the details of the plan. I'll look at the first section, which is climate mitigation. Remember, that's reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So mitigation, this is based on the greenhouse gas inventory, and this wedge chart is, this is an analysis of the emissions. We used modeling tools to project out where contributions not only are currently contributions to greenhouse gas emissions, but map them out over time so that we can develop strategies around them. And so the colors of the pie chart reflect the different sectors, and you can see that in the key on this, this chart. I will draw your attention to the largest wedge there, which is the contribution from, as I said, power sector. So decarbonizing energy sources is our biggest opportunity for reducing emissions over time. And then I'll go through a little bit more detail some of the other strategies, but I don't have time to get into all of them. So you can just take a look there and see contributions related to building energy. Energy policy is the top three. It's a very, very big wedge. Water and waste, and then also look at sequestration. Those are the yellow and the green lines. Those are tiny, but I'm still going to talk about them because they're vitally important for lots of other reasons. And then you'll see the transportation wedges in there too as significant contributions. But let me help you understand this chart, and I'll explain it a little bit more. So if you look at the beginning year for which we've mapped out greenhouse gas emissions, we're using the 2015 greenhouse gas inventory. And that is, the starting point is 119 million metric tons annually of greenhouse gas emissions in our region. And then what you see is those emissions, if we do nothing, they will rise. And they will rise because of a projected population growth in our region. And this is often called a business as usual scenario. So that's not acceptable. So certainly interventions need to be done. And that target year for this climate action plan and many others is 2050. So the goal is to drive those emissions down. And if you look at the wedge, the colorful part of the wedges, that represents all of the modeling that we did. And we were able to demonstrate emissions reductions a little bit over 80%. On science-based modeling is what we were able to come up with. We were not able to demonstrate through science-based modeling a net zero achievement through any of the strategies that we have in our region by the year 2050, but that's a long way off. And so there is a hopeful green bar that is labeled needed innovation, which looks at better data, better modeling, more aggressive actions, carbon capture, other things that we don't yet know about, but we know the target is, and we know the IPCC recommends, strongly recommends urgent elimination of greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2050. So therefore, putting together the plan, and there might be questions about this, so if you have them, we'll try to get to it. I hope I explained that well, but I will move on. So that gap that we have and the desire to get to 2050 gives us a climate mitigation goal of net zero. And that is a goal, whereas our targets, which are more science-based, are specifically modeled, and this is where you see the numbers. This is true in our region and it's true in other regions, that significant reduction is theoretically possible. We could see a 50% reduction from baseline year 2005 emissions by the year 2030. There's an interim target in 2040 just to help us measure and keep track. And then the 2050 target, again, science-based target, is an 80% reduction. Not the net zero, but the net zero is the goal. So if that's not confusing terminology, we were trying to cover all bases there with targets and goals. And so now further details into the mitigation objectives. And I'll go through these one at a time. They are in the plan. I encourage you to read it and get to know them, but I'll just scan through them quickly here. So first is actions demonstrating leadership to reduce emissions. And in climate planning language, that these are called enabling actions. These are actions which are vitally important, that are not attitude changes and procurement decisions and things like that, that are really important, but we cannot directly attribute emissions reductions to. Moving into the ones that we can and that are very important, decarbonize energy sources. This is generating electricity from means other than fossil fuels and looking at net zero emissions from the power sector. Optimize building energy. This is both energy efficiency and clean energy sources to power our buildings. Implement clean energy policies. This is pulled out as a separate objective because it's so powerful and broad, includes procurement decisions as well as building policy. Decarbonized transportation. This objective addresses internal combustion engines and the need to replace them with cleaner means of transportation. Reduce vehicle miles traveled. This is my new favorite objective, and this is getting out of vehicles and traveling around the region in ways other than vehicles, including public transit, bicycles, and walking. Manage water and waste sustainably. Efficiencies in managing drinking water, wastewater, and waste, particularly food waste, is addressed in this objective. And then finally, the one that you're likely to be most interested in is sustain ecosystems to sequester carbon. And I'll point out that this is in the mitigation portion of the plan, which is a little bit pioneering because there's not a lot of data on sequestering carbon from ecosystems, and not as much as we need or in the same complexity that we see in the other sectors. But nonetheless, that's the part that I'm going to, the one objective that I'd like to dig in a little bit further with this audience. And so in the plan itself, the wedge charts are broken down and you can see the numbers related to actions within this particular objective. And so again, a small contribution, but it's detailed what those targets will be over time and what the overall contributions can be from actions within this objective. And so this is a snapshot of the strategies page. It's presented in many ways in the climate action plan. And this is just a few of the strategies related to the objective sustain ecosystems to sequester carbon. And if you look at the column and the labeled strategies there, you will see plain speak what that strategy is. And this was a shout out to all of our conservation at home and conservation at work properties, because this does factor into the climate action plan. And again, this is a strategy that municipalities can encourage this kind of behavior among other property owners. And that municipal role column helps a municipality user look at that strategy and determine how, if they have the abilities and the strengths and the capacity to get that done and how they might get it done. The next columns, and again, this is greatly reduced because of the need to present this on a slide, are the next columns help decision makers evaluate that strategy and how to get it done. Do they have the resources to get it done, and what would it take? So the solution status is a term that just says, what's the risk here? Is it going to work? So things are either proven or evolving, and you'll see the one that I put in there on soil as aspirational. But that's just an evaluation. Hopefully, some of these will change, but the proven ones, these are winners. Just get it done. In most strategies, the greenhouse gas reduction potential will be labeled as low, medium, or high. In the case of ecosystems, it's sequestration, which again is a little bit different. And then the remaining columns related to cost and effort required, again, just help decision makers understand what it takes. And then not represented on this slide, but in the plan in detail, for each mitigation objective and strategy are equity considerations, partners that are helpful to consider when undertaking these strategies, projected outcomes from the mitigation strategies, and then co-benefits. And watch for that term co-benefit. And what that means, again, in the climate planning language is benefits that are seen across both mitigation and adaptation. So basically, on the mitigation side, what are the adaptive or benefits from taking those actions? And there's very strong in the natural resources or sustainable ecosystems objective and strategies. So that's the presentation of the mitigation objectives, and I'll switch now to adaptation, which is similar but a little bit different. And then you'll hear adaptation and resilience used a little bit interchangeably, but just to describe the nuance in here and how it's approached in the plan. And again, credit to NOAA for their expertise in this. But climate change is already upon us. We've built systems in place that did not anticipate the kind of weather extremes that we're already seeing and expect to see much more of in the future. And so we have to adapt in order to survive. And the difference now is if we adapt to these changes with careful investment, planning, cohesive stakeholder engagement, thoughtful investments, and forward thinking, we can build resilience, and we can look at a future in which we not only survive climate change, but we thrive. And so this is what the resilience objective, the resilience portion of the plan really looks like, is not only bouncing back better from climate impacts, but building strong, resilient communities. And so the data for the adaptation portion of the plan comes from climate risk and vulnerability assessment. And you'll see, as I mentioned earlier, the top 3 threats related to extreme precipitation, heat, and then drought and water supply. And they're further broken down a little bit here because flooding is it's a huge challenge for our region, and impacts on flooding in homes is different than flooding in transportation. Stormwater and infrastructure is separated out as own, again, hugely important and very important to this group. Heat impacts are also related to health outcomes for populations, particularly for vulnerable residents. Air quality, flooding, and public health is a complex sector, which looks at impacts from flooding, heat on housing stock, and how people are able to manage those extremes. And then drought and water supply, which is, again, extremely significant to portions of our region. As many of you know, Joliet is facing shortages in their water supply. So the climate adaptation goal, I don't want to call it not science-based, but it is not numerically tied. So it was a little bit easier to come up with targets and goals. And the goal for climate adaptation is persistent, equitable climate adaptation. And the interim targets here then look at steps over time that will build resilience. And looking at 2030, focusing a little bit more inward on climate resilient governance, internal processes that local governments can take. 2040, the target is resilience across jurisdictions, looking at more collaboration. And then finally, the target in 2050 is cohesive, resilient communities. And the adaptation objectives, as I said, this was an area that I was apprehensive about. I didn't think we had a lot of strengths in the region, and we don't. But when it came to how do we address adaptation, it came back to familiar themes that local governments I know and communities are fully capable of addressing. And first one is engage and educate the community about resilience and adaptation. Again, strength of the Conservation Foundation, strength of the many partners you have here in our local governments. Incorporate equity and inclusion into climate adaptation efforts. Again, woven throughout the plan, but called out here in adaptation. Collaborate and build capacity. Again, another strength. Enact policies and plans focused on adaptation and resilience, and adapt operations and investments for future climate conditions. So these are the objectives. And because adaptation is more complicated in many ways than mitigation, these are overlaid with the hazard impacts that I described earlier, so that you can plan out or sort of assess from objectives and strategies within enacting plans and policies focused on adaptation and resilience, how they relate to each of these climate-related hazards. So this is an snapshot again of the portion of the plan addressing this climate adaptation strategies. And again here, for just purposes of explanation, is a snapshot. And so again, we have strategies and their municipal role. So this is protect surface and groundwater from contamination, enact policies and plans, and encourage others to take action. And then you have the decision-making tools as far as cost, risk, and effort required. And then remember, equity is its own objective in climate adaptation, but there's further details in partners, outcome, and co-benefits. This is again relating back to climate adaptation, climate mitigation strategies. So the interface between climate mitigation and climate adaptation. And that's the overview of the CAP, or the Climate Action Plan. So let me talk now, just since we've launched this plan in July. I'll also retreat back a little bit to earlier times in the Greenest Region Compact and talk about how we're then using this plan to engage partners, communities, and build support for the Climate Action Plan. So first, really when we launched the plans, everything was focused on getting the plan done and out the door. And the reason for doing the plan, if you go back to what I said in the beginning, was to really empower local governments. So shortly after launching the plan, we provided our municipal members an opportunity to pass a resolution endorsing the goals of the Climate Action Plan, which was the same way we did the Greenest Region Compact strategy, is get on board with just getting behind, make a public statement that you support those goals. And remember that if the goal is net zero and persistent equitable climate adaptation. So we have 30 municipalities in these few months that have formally endorsed the goals of the Climate Action Plan, 4 of our councils of governments. And then we were surprised and delighted that the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District also passed a resolution supporting the Climate Action Plan. And the long-term vision of the plan was that it eventually will help local governments create their own climate action plan if they wanted to. I was thinking a little bit more that it would allow them to take action right away, and I'll get to that. But we do have some pioneering communities that looked at the plan and said, we would like to do this. I'm going to shout out, I saw Elgin on the call. So Elgin was one of those communities just earlier this week or last week that said, we'd like to try to use the plan to scale it down for our own local plan. So we're working on that. That's a work in progress and relatively new. So thank you to any other pioneer that wants to try that out. Okay, so next steps then for the Climate Action Plan. I'm going backwards a little bit to the Greenest Region Compact, and the next step is to update the Greenest Region Compact. So I'm going to go back a little bit and explain more details about the Greenest Region Compact. And what you're seeing here is the precursor to the Climate Action Plan, which is the Greenest Region Compact, and this is the framework page. So this framework is an elaborate spreadsheet that is, because of the way it's designed, is a tool that allows municipalities to do a self-assessment and to use this checklist to develop their own sustainability plan. So that's the strength of this framework. The other strength of this framework is that it's very familiar. We think it has spawned a couple dozen sustainability plans, Greenest Region Compact-based sustainability plans at local levels. And so it's popular, welcome, understood. We have 140 communities that formally support the Greenest Region Compact. The shortcomings then is that this is a sustainability plan not a plan, but a sustainability checklist, and the goals are sustainability related. The climate action plan is an update and a sharper focus on specific climate action. So the next step is to bring those two together and update the Greenest Region Compact to reflect the new inputs from the climate action plan. And again, primitive little snapshots here of the two frameworks. So on top is the Greenest Region Compact framework. And what I put up here just for explanation purposes is that you'll see the strategy more related to adopting codes and permitting practices to support renewable energy systems. This is, if any of you are from a soul smart community, this is a strategy that is very successful, and we think it will continue to be successful, that municipalities really prepare for clean energy technologies. And so that carried through from the Greenest Region Compact framework into the climate action plan. So again, next step here is to bring these two documents together and create a usable tool for communities to update plans, create plans, and take climate action. The next step, which is something, again, that goes back a little bit over time. When I launched the Greenest Region Compact, it was launched without a tracking and reporting system. And it's always been a gap that I'm aware of. Communities are aware of it, and we always wanted to get to it. But then the climate crisis consumed some time and energy, and we didn't have a chance yet to develop a tracking and reporting system as a companion to the Greenest Region Compact. But the opportunity is now to bring this all together under the climate action plan. And so the vision is that we have a tracking and reporting system that fundamentally is there to support the member community in measuring their own progress so that they can track their results, guide themselves into priority actions, and report back to their constituents in the way that they'd like to about what's getting done. We hope to recognize community success through some sort of a recognition program for communities. And then, of course, we also want to measure regional progress towards climate action plan goals. And that is, we're raising funds for that now. We're seeking partnerships, but we're ready to tackle this once there's enough funds that are raised to take on this next step. But we've done a lot of homework to prepare for this. And one of them has been an analysis of all the other tracking and reporting systems in the region. And as I said in my introduction, we're the largest regional sustainability collaborative for municipalities in the US. One of the largest, most robust statewide ones is a program that I've long had a crush on called Sustainable Jersey. And this statewide program, this is just a snapshot of their webpage, but you can figure out that they have certification or recognition for community achievements. And then this slide, if you were to click on any one of those dots on the map, you could get a profile of the community. And this sort of report card profile is the thing that we think would be, and the municipalities have told us they would really like to see. So this is where we're headed with our reporting and tracking system. This is also a great way to organize municipal actions and invite participation and report action. So it's how we can manage action across the region. And then winding almost at the end here, regional scale implementation. So as I said right at the beginning, the Greenest Region Compact Collaborative is really focused on getting things done. And this is what we're about to also on the climate action plan. So already underway, some of them were going on concurrent to the climate action planning, but there are 3 programs that we have right now that align directly with the objectives in the climate action plan. So if you look at the first one, optimize building energy, and remember I told you to take a close look at residential energy efficiency. We found that addressing 26% of our emissions is something that's really powerfully need to be done. There's a lot of energy efficiency programs, clean energy programs, but we're exercising that municipal role in promoting and engaging residential energy efficiency. So that's a project that we have underway. Another project that is underway this is a new one, Decarbonized Transportation. Remember, this is clean energy, clean transportation alternatives. And we just, we studied for 2 years to create a program called EV Readiness. And just at the beginning of the year, we secured funding from Commonwealth Edison to partner and create a roadmap for municipalities to streamline codes and policies to be ready for transportation electrification. And we expect at the beginning of next year, early next year, we will be ready to designate the first cohort of communities as EV ready. And any of you following the news will know that there's a lot of money coming from Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, as well as the Climate Equity and Jobs Act at the state level for transportation electrification. And our municipalities will be ready to secure that funding and support decarbonizing transportation. And finally, I mentioned this is my new favorite objective because I am a cyclist and I've done a lot of walking during the pandemic. And I appreciate and love the trails that we have. I live in DuPage County. So this new objective is reduce vehicle miles traveled, or get out of the vehicles and look at other ways to get around. And well, the Mayor's Caucus has not historically been involved in this because we have such strong organizations. In this, because we have the Climate Action Plan, we're now partnering with Active Transportation Alliance and the Metropolitan Planning Council, again, looking at the municipal role in supporting land use planning and creating bicycle pedestrian access and making for safe, accessible streets that can help us reduce vehicle miles traveled. And then just in closing, I wanted to go back to the first image that I have now with our timeline there. So recognizing the plan came out in 2021 and the clock is ticking. As we all heard this summer, this past summer, IPC declared code red for humanity. This is an urgent threat to our existence. And so we all need to take united action to address the climate emergency. And I encourage all of you to find your place in the plan. Look at it. I know it's a big document. We have a lot of ways to digest it on our website. But if you can find some actions that either you as an individual, your company, your organization, or if you're engaged in or a leader in local government, find a way to engage with the CAP, grab a few actions, and please join us in taking urgent climate action. Thank you so much for the opportunity to address you and for your attention. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Edith. Really appreciate that. So there are a couple questions in the question and answers. First question is there work on sustainability metrics between now and 2050, both on achieving goals and resiliency stability? He says it seems like it can be a foundation for future funding.
Correct. That is the vision. And I will say it's easier to quantify the mitigation objectives because we always have measures. We have metrics there. The metrics are a little bit harder. They were impossible for me to try to gather for adaptation objectives at the regional level just because we're lacking data. But that is the plan. And the sustainability metrics, those are also easier to gather. So the new reporting system will be a combination of both sustainability strategies that include things like local food, which is a sustainability strategy that may not translate to having mitigation actions, but those two will come together so a municipality can measure where they're having impacts.
Great. And someone asked if the last slide can be reposted. They'd like your contact information, I think.
I will put that back up.
Sure. There we go. So the other question was regarding reducing vehicle emissions traveled. Is the increased work from home effect on this being quantified?
Yes, it is. And that's actually the reason that the 2020 greenhouse gas inventory isn't being utilized. Initially, as we all heard, the air was clear around the world because people were staying home. We didn't see, it turns out it's not as enduring as we hoped it would be for the Chicago metro region. But the work from home solutions or other ways remote work is definitely a part of the solution. So if you don't have to travel, even shopping has changed, there are cleaner alternatives to getting things done that reduce tailpipe emissions.
Yeah, and Christina Murphy also posted Naperville is implementing a work plan, and she has posted that in the question and answers. Robert asks, with the reduction of combustion transportation engines and the increase of electrical vehicles, won't the stationary electric production increase greatly?
Not really. It certainly can change demand, but There are production excesses because of the way we use energy during the day. And I'm not an energy expert, but there's an afternoon peak, which is if you're participating in some of the utility programs, you know that you're encouraged to not use energy during the afternoon. In charging, so when you're doing vehicle charging, most vehicle charging takes place overnight. And if you can, through policies and programs, encourage that charging to take some of the we have to, sorry, I didn't explain it well, but there has to be the capacity to meet demands for energy used throughout the day. Once that energy drops off, there's an opportunity to continue production. And the way the utilities view electric vehicles is energy storage. So you need to put the energy that is generated, hopefully from renewable energy sources, wind and solar generate during the day. And if you could store that somewhere, like in electric vehicle batteries, that's one way to stabilize the grid. So there may be increased demands, but the really smart way to do this is called managed charging, which looks at the contribution that electric vehicles and electric vehicles have to helping to stabilize clean energy transmission throughout the day.
Good. Yeah, and I think you've answered a part of this question. The next person was asking, what has the impact of so many people working from home have on the climate action plan? And I think you sort of answered that, but there might be more detail that you could provide.
Just a little bit more on home energy use.
Okay.
So I don't think, that was necessarily something that was anticipated, but people were home and controlling their thermostat. So I think, I don't know that that's actually been measured or quantified, but it certainly has changed the way we use energy and approach work.
So there's not a question here, but I did have one. So you mentioned that some communities have adapted this plan and more coming on board. If someone wanted to, get more involved, or a community out there wants to do that, would they contact you directly?
Correct. Please
Okay.
contact me directly if you would just like to bring to your community's attention. And again, we welcome other units of government to endorse the climate action plan. And the way the Greenest Region Compact was crafted and promoted is that this is for communities that don't have the ability to really do analysis on your own. The Mayor's Caucus, we're happy to do that for you. And so there should be a great deal of comfort and trust in the way we put the numbers together. So for a local government to simply endorse the plan is a great way to say, we understand this is really important and we're behind you. It's supporting our work, but it also is a way to communicate to your constituents that you are cognizant of the need for urgent climate action and you're on board with that. So those tools are on our website where you can simply download the municipal resolution, discuss it. If I can be helpful in those deliberations, please contact me and I'd be happy to help. When it comes to creating a climate action plan from that, we need to work together because I don't have a self-directed tool for that just yet.
Okay, great. Well, right now, and as I said, Christina had mentioned there's some on YouTube. There's information more about Naperville's Sustainable Naperville 236 report that's out there too, talking about their climate action plan. But with that, there's no more questions. So I want to thank you, Edith, for presenting today and being a part of this conference. And with that, I think we're just going to take a break early. The next presentation starts at 9:15. So we have a little extra time. I have a video I'm going to be playing. You can look at that. And also, if you want to take a break right now, we'll go ahead and take a break. Thank you, Edith, so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So let me start. I got to share my screen. I got to pull this up again. Let's try that again.
I know you don't like taking the garbage out. Nobody does. Yeah, garbage. The gross, smelly stuff that you and I both hate.
The way we maintain landscapes today, traditional landscapes, is not sustainable. Turf is our #1 crop in the United States, so we spend the most water and fertilizer doing that. We spend a lot of fuel and labor doing that. And so going forward, we're going to have to find better ways to maintain our earth using less resources, and converting a lot of our areas to native plants makes sense from an environmental standpoint as far as cleaning our water, having it percolate back into the ground to replicate systems that were here before we've disturbed them, increasing the pollinator habitat that's available that we've diminished already, just to make landscape practices more consistent with leaving the earth in a better condition than what we found it for the next generation. I'm Bill Bedrosian. I'm owner of Bedrock Earthscapes, and we enrich life through improving our environment, and we do that by maintaining native plant areas. Because we've realized the benefits. So if we use those along the edge of water and we have movement of water, it etches that away and can cut under it. Whereas if you have native plants with very deep roots along moving water, right, it'll hold the soil in place and so it won't move. Now, a homeowner association or a public entity doesn't have to rebuild their pond banks every 20 years or 15 years. It can be a permanent solution by installing, converting to native plants, and then once those deep roots get established, they hold the soil particles in place and they won't wash away as much. Then we have other clients who want to do it for economic reasons. They don't want to have to rebuild their pond bank in 25 years. If you think about on a per acre basis, if you have to have turf, you have to mow it in this area 22 times a year. That means 22 times the amount of labor, the use of equipment, the use of fuel, pollutants going into the air, fertilization, broadleaf herbicides, all that goes away when you convert to natives. And then the aesthetic reason, that it looks beautiful. As we toured properties here recently, one of the clients mentioned, oh, they're beautiful, they're white and blue in the spring, and they're yellow now in the summer, and then they turn purple, and then they turn pink. So there's a succession of color too. So you have the aesthetics of natives that are really, really attractive. We use a byline of sustainable solutions, right? And oftentimes, some of our Park District clients are solving their issues while improving sustainability. So they're saying, well, it's really difficult to mow these areas in the early spring because it's so wet. Our mowers can't get in there or they'll get stuck. Some of our clients are converting those areas to meadows. There's active recreation and there's passive recreation. People have traditionally thought, oh, we're going to go to the park for active recreation. We're going to play baseball. We're going to play soccer. We're going to do something. But there's a lot of people who want to go for a walk on the trail. There's a lot of people who enjoy watching the butterflies and the bees and seeing the pretty flowers and seeing what's going on with nature. That's another reason why a lot of the problem areas are now in Park District areas that aren't large enough. Maybe they're strips along parking lots or they're outer sections that's not being used, can be converted to natives to lower cost, help our environment, and to reduce a maintenance problem at the same time. Some of the challenges is that people still think that native areas look like weeds. They don't understand that they're natives just because they look different. And part of that is because we put the wrong plants in some of the seed mixes when we put them in. And so we have these very tall plants that look out of place in a very manicured landscape. And so that's one thing, how we design them, the varieties that we choose. And we have to keep in mind that plants only grow in habitats to which they're adapted, and so we have to choose the right plants. So there's been a lot of education about pollinator gardens and butterfly gardens, so people are starting to understand that. They're starting to understand the need to cleanse, cool, and filter water so that we have cleaner rivers and streams. And we've made great progress in the 40 or 50 years as I've seen them. There are birds now that we never used to see, hawks and things like that that are plentiful now that never were. So we're making progress, but we need to continue to do that because the pressure is going to be on us to continue to degrade more and more areas. Our work is amazingly rewarding. We get to maintain beautiful landscapes which benefit mankind and make the world a better place for the next generation.
I love every bread, all the breads.
So some of you may be coming back from break. I hope you enjoyed the video. That was Bill Bedrosian with Bedrock Earthscapes, who does a lot of naturalized pond edging for park districts and municipalities. And he's a sponsor of this workshop this year and every year. And also I want to also give a shout out. As I said, the county has been a sponsor of this and they have some upcoming workshops. And we also have the DuPage River Sweep, which is coming up on May 21st. So if you want to register, you can go online to our events page and register at that time. So it's 9:14. I want to introduce our next speakers. And our next presentation is Ditch Your Ditch, the Village of Downers Grove Bioswale Program. And our presenters are Kristen Dykema. She's an environmental scientist with HLR, and also Julie Lomax, who is a stormwater administrator for the Village of Downers Grove. And we've been working closely with them, as I mentioned, on the native plants, tree and shrub sale that's coming up, and also our rain barrel workshop, our rain barrel sale that's coming up with them also at that time. So we got one more minute here, and I'm going to turn it over to Julie and Kristen if you want to share your screen. If you're speaking, Julie or Kristen, we can't hear you.
All right.
There we go.
Thank you, Jan.
You're welcome.
All right, welcome everyone. I am Julie Lomax, Stormwater Administrator with the Village of Downers Grove, as Jan said.
And I'm Kristen Dykema, an environmental scientist with HLR Engineering, and we'll be presenting on Ditch Your Ditch, the Village of Downers Grove Biosphere Program.
So just a quick overview of our presentation. I will give you a little background on Downers Grove urban flooding issues and the Green Streets Bioswale program. And then Kristen will jump in and talk about the installation process, resident education, and some lessons learned. So first, a brief background about Downers Grove. Like many suburbs of Chicago, Downers Grove is highly urbanized. Lots of areas with curb and gutter and storm sewer, but also lots of areas with ditches. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here talking today. Downers Grove is nestled kind of right in between I-88 and 355, just west of Chicago. We have three main watersheds: Lacey Creek to the north, St. Joseph's Creek in the center, and Prentice Creek in the south. All three are tributary to the east branch of the DuPage River, which is impaired according to the IEPA. So in 2012, the village established a stormwater utility fee. This provided a dedicated source of funding for our stormwater management projects, as well as, more importantly, our stormwater maintenance. This took the burden out of the property tax and put it into a fee. And the fee is based on the impervious area on the lot. So it's a tiered system. And impervious area is anything that significantly impedes the infiltration of stormwater into the soil. So parking lots, roofs, driveways, decks, swimming pools. And the tiered system is based on one equivalent runoff unit, or ERU, which at the time of the study was 3,300 square feet, which was the average for a single family lot. So single family has three different tiers. They're billed every other month on their water bill. And then non-single family residential, so that would be commercial, industrial, and then residential parcels with more than 7,000 are based per ERU. And then vacant lots do also benefit from the stormwater management system, so they are charged a smaller portion. We do have two different fee reduction strategies. One is incentives, rain barrels. You get a one-time incentive for $25. As Jan mentioned, we have a rain barrel sale coming up. The other is if you put in a rain garden, permeable pavers, or anything else that helps to treat the water, so water quality benefit, as well as hold some of the water for a short time on your property. There is a one-time incentive for those. We do also have ongoing credits for larger properties like homeowners associations or big commercial properties, where they're actually detaining the water and reducing the amount that goes into the stormwater, at least slowing it down. So there are different options for that as well. And that is an ongoing credit with yearly information that needs to be submitted. So the stormwater utility fee generates the revenues, as I said, for the maintenance as well as for new projects. And what we're focused on today is this approximately 140 miles of roadway ditches that we have in the village. So this is where our Green Streets Bioswale program is focused. So the Green Street Bioswale program started in 2014-ish, 2013, with two different projects in the village, where we were going through and doing a stormwater project and a roadway reconstruction or resurfacing. And both of those areas had ditches in them. And so residents in those neighborhoods were offered the option to install a rain garden in their ditch. The village would install it, maintain it for a year, and then turn it over to the homeowner. Kristen will talk a little bit more about some of the lessons we've learned with those projects, but that's really where the Bioswale program was born from. And then we have a little video clip here that our wonderful communications department did.
If you have a roadside drainage ditch that is wet or difficult to mow, you may be a candidate for the village's Bioswale program. Bioswales are ditches planted with deep-rooted native plants that help absorb and filter stormwater runoff. Bioswales reduce stormwater runoff by about 30% because native plants absorb more water than turf grass. Native plants also attract wildlife like birds and pollinators. The Bioswale program was developed to convert existing roadside drainage ditches into beautiful, beneficial landscape areas at no cost to the homeowner. The village will coordinate the selection of native plants with the homeowner, modify the ditch as needed, install the plants, and provide maintenance for the first year. Please visit downers.us to learn more. The Bioswale Program, helping keep our streets green.
So that video was sent out on a Friday, end of the day, with our weekly e-newsletter. And when I came in on Monday morning, I had phone calls, I had emails. We have a waiting list now of like 30 or 40 people. Lots of people wanted bioswales. So it's been very popular. And in conjunction with the video, we also developed this little brochure that we can hand out to people. And like it said in the video, the village will take care of planting the plants, which Kristen will talk about. We'll maintain them for a year, and then we give them some guidance on how to take care of them. So we'll modify the ditch if we need to, provide maintenance and guidance. And the homeowner works with us to select the plants that they like, that work in their ditch. They agree to care for it regularly. They may need to water it when it's first planted, but ideally then long-term, they will not need to water it. And then they assume responsibility after that first year. And then Kristen will take over on implementation.
Thank you. So Julie just discussed the Downers Grove urban flooding and the Green Streets bioswale program, and now I'll be discussing how to install a bioswale and also resident education. HLR's role in the Green Streets program was coordination with the residents, designing and creating the bioswales themselves, and then the first year of maintenance, and then educating the residents so that they have all the tools needed to properly care for their new bioswale. The installation process. When a homeowner initially applies for the program, we first assess their property to determine if the existing ditch is a good candidate. We check the ditch for its slope and also for drainage issues. Is the site mostly sunny or is it mostly shaded? Is the swale currently dominated by turf grass? And if it is that turf grass dead and struggling because there's constant standing water? Is the parkway flat and never holds water? The top two photos are areas that we decided would not fit the program because there was no existing drainage ditch. The goal of the Green Streets program is to provide relief from flooding issues. If there are no issues with standing water, then there's no need for a bioswale. The photo on the bottom is an ideal candidate for the program. There are steep slopes that make it impossible for the homeowner to be able to get their mower in there safely. And during rain events, the swale actually overflows onto the sidewalk and it was creating ponded water near their home. So a perfect candidate for some plants. Once we choose the swale, we set up a meeting with the resident. We talk about their concerns. Are they not able to mow because that slope is a little too steep, or is it too wet and too soggy, so there's a high chance that their mower can get stuck? The residents are ultimately going to be caring for their bioswale in the future, so we work with them to determine how wide they would like to see the swale, what native plants they would like to see. The goal of the swale is to counter drainage issues, so we explain to the homeowners what plants would work best within their swale. These bioswales are customizable to each home because every swale is different. If your neighbor across the street has a ditch that is only 2 feet wide, that doesn't necessarily mean that yours has to be the same. We do, of course, have budgetary restrictions, but we also want the bioswales to counter any potential safety issues and also work for your yard and for your space. The second picture on the right shows that we treat the turf grass with herbicide to kill the grass off prior to planting. In doing so and leaving that dead turf grass there, it provides a mulch to protect the plants from weeds as they establish. The turf also helps to retain moisture close to the plants as they grow. Our next step is planting. We create a planting plan with about 8 to 10 native plant species, depending on the size of the bioswale. We plant them in groupings, so it's easier for the homeowners to identify them, and also so they just look more purposeful and manicured. With native plantings, our most common complaint is that's just a field of weeds. And when you have a small area of 25 different species, it can easily start to look unkept. So our goal is to keep few species in groupings to make the bioswales look purposeful. Because this program is a partnership, we work with the residents to pick out what species they would like to see. We've had some residents tell us that they hate yellow flowers, so we work with them to ensure that there will not be a yellow flower in sight. If they have a hand in choosing their plants, they feel more connected to the project and then have more incentive to care for it. There are certain requirements for the Green Streets program when it comes to the actual plants themselves. All of these bioswales are along the roadway, so that means plants within 5 feet of the roadway and within 10 feet of an intersection or stop sign should be less than 3 feet tall. The plants within the perimeter of the site should be low growing, and the interior should be less than 3 feet in height. We follow these height guidelines and also try to keep in mind plants that can be salt tolerant, have lots of color, and various blooming times so that the bioswale isn't just beautiful in the beginning of June. Each bioswale has its own custom list of plants to ensure the survival in all different growing conditions. In these pictures, you can see that there are 2 different habitats. One bioswale is completely shaded for a portion of the day, whereas the other one has full sun. One bioswale has constant standing water, where the other one only has water during heavy rain events. So planting the plants in the proper locations is key for survival. Each plant has a wetland indicator status. So there's, if you look at this diagram, there's upland, facultative wetland, and obligate. You can see that the upland plants start at the top of the slope, and then we work down to the FAC up, and then farther down the slope as FAC, moving farther down is FAC wet, and then our obligate plants are in the middle. Upland plants are found mostly in dry areas, so think more prairies, and obligate plants are almost always found in wetlands. Facultative plants are in that middle ground, and they can handle both wetter and drier conditions. FAC wet would be in the tier between obligate and FAC. We always like to say that those plants like to get their feet wet. And then the FAC up would be in between upland and facultative. So all of our bioswales that hold water for longer periods of time would have obligate or those FAC wet plants in the basin bottom because they're more suited for wetter conditions and they thrive when their roots have a lot of water to soak up. Then you would have the FAC plants moving up the slopes because they can handle rain events, but their roots can hold some water, but they can also survive without water as well. And then at the top of the slope, you have your upland plants lining the edge. So planting in the appropriate locations is super important to ensure all plants survive and thrive. So this is our famous root systems diagram, just to prove that having a drainage ditch planted with turf grass with teeny tiny little root systems could never hold the same amount of water that all of these native plants could. When we pave over our landscapes and replace those deep-rooted native plants with shallow-rooted turf grasses, we inevitably make flooding events worse. Bioswales planted with native plants reduce stormwater runoff by approximately 30% because of their deep root systems. They also slowly replenish groundwater levels and local aquifers while also filtering out many pollutants. After our first year, where the initial planting occurs, HLR will provide maintenance to the bioswales. This maintenance would include hand weeding any weed that pops up while the plants are establishing, but also any supplemental plantings in the case that any plants didn't survive from the previous year. When our 1 year is up and it's time to hand over the bioswale to the homeowners, we provide them with custom handbooks to help aid them as they start their journey with their new bioswale. So resident education. This handbook includes information like what is a bioswale, why is my bioswale important, and all of the benefit it provides. There's also a description of the maintenance provided by HLR and then tips and tricks for caring for it, like when should we mow it? Should I even mow it? Can I use herbicide in it or should I only hand weed? We then provide a page that is more specific to their bioswale and what species were planted. It reads, we designed a custom planting plan just for you, carefully selected each species to form a native plant community that fits the needs of your specific bioswale. The species are separated out by upland species that they will find more along the tops of the slopes, and then those wetland species that are planted in the bottom. We also created a planting map. This map has all approximate locations of the species, and it's super helpful when you're trying to identify the plant that's growing and you can look at the map and see, oh, that's an iris that's growing in that back corner. It's also helpful when you can compare it to the native plant booklet. These are all native species that were planted within their specific bioswale. Each sheet gives pictures of the flower head, photos of how the leaf attaches to the stem, bloom time, information on what wildlife the plant attracts, just any information that could be helpful to them when they're trying to determine what's growing. But then we also have a weed guide with the same photos for identification and easy tips and tricks to help identify them. We included common weeds and also non-desirable native plants that they don't want growing within their bioswale. A couple of the bioswales were located near prairies or other native areas, and so they had goldenrod or other taller species that had popped over and wanted to grow. So those are some of the species that don't fit within the height restrictions. So we want to make sure that those aren't growing there. The handbook, including all of the planting maps and all the guides, is handed to the resident, and then we walk through the bioswale and let them ask any and all questions before they're on their own to care for their bioswale. So there are many benefits of this program. Number one is obviously improved stormwater retention. The deep root systems of the native plants counter drainage issues and reduce stormwater runoff, but they also filter out pollutants out of the water, which improves the water quality of the creeks and streams nearby. Once established, the bioswales take care of themselves. The ditches no longer need mowing or attention, which ultimately saves time and money. And once the bioswale is established, the plants, they grow dense and they filter out weeds themselves, and they really don't need much care. Every resident that's a part of this program has signed up for it, which is awesome because they're invested. They know and they understand the importance of their bioswale and all the benefits that they provide with water storage, but also that they're great pollinator gardens as well. The Village of Downers Grove is partnered with the Conservation Foundation. The homeowners can apply for a certification that identifies their bioswale as a wildlife haven and an environmentally friendly landscape. The residents can also extend their bioswale and apply for a rain garden incentive as a stormwater utility fee reduction strategy. We've had residents in the past with their bioswale ask for, can we have more milkweed? Can we have these? Because they know that the monarchs love those. And so we have little monarch way station signs that are really cool as kids walk by and as another education opportunity. This program is really taking off, and as more residents find out about the program and witness the benefits provided, but they can also see how aesthetically pleasing it is to have a beautiful bioswale in your front yard instead of a muddy, stagnant mosquito haven. The waiting list is ever growing. Like Julie said, we initially started the program with between 15 and 18 bioswales. We just this last summer installed an additional 10, and we have more and more people signing up. Our waiting list is ever growing. We have between 30 and 40 people, which is amazing. Lessons learned as this program has been implemented. Like the diagram I showed earlier, plants have their conditions that they like to grow in. So if you plant an upland plant in the bottom of a bioswale where there's constantly standing water, the plants likely aren't going to survive, and vice versa. So knowing your plants is key, but also knowing your plant's growing tendencies is key, and making sure that they're all planted according to the restrictions. Having a plant that you know grows super bushy and planting it on the side of the road in front of a stop sign probably isn't going to be your best bet. Planting only a couple species within the swale makes them look more manicured and purposeful. As for resident communication, it's important to set up communication boundaries. As I'm sure we all know, residents can be passionate. One thing that we learned is implementing communication lines between project leads and residents, and then also limiting those forms of communication. Email seems to be the best bet we have learned. So please let us know if you have any questions about the program or if you're interested in implementing a similar program in your community. Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity for allowing us to present.
So thank you, Kirsten and Julie, for your presentation. There are some questions in the chat and in the question and answer. So I'll take the other two first. Someone asked, are the plant materials resistant to road salt? But you did mention that in your presentation that yes, the plants selected are resistant. They were asking also, is a sample native plant booklet available to share with their audience?
Yeah, we could send one to you, Jan, if you want, or they can reach out to one of us and we'll be happy to share that.
So yeah, I was going to say, Julie, if you send it to me, I'll be sending out PDH certificates and the link to the video for this presentation. So I can include that information. I can include that material there with the email that I send out to everyone. And also we have a list, the Conservation Foundation, we had put together with Downers Grove years ago when we worked with you on bioswales. And it has the list of plant materials, like what natives survive in standing water, because they need different conditions. The sides need less, they need to be a little bit drier, and the top are more like prairie plants, as you said. So we can share that list also. So the first, so the first question is, have you had any pushback or concerns from the residents after the first year complaining about the cost of upkeep?
No, we haven't had anyone complain about that. And as Kristen said, the key is really to, these are residents who want to do this. These are residents who have contacted us, and then getting the plant selection to what they like so that they want to keep it looking the way it started as much as possible. So no, we haven't had anyone complain about that.
Great. Do you foresee any opportunities for plantings in HOA retention ponds?
I don't know. I mean, this is really meant for the
Bioswale.
ditches. Yeah, I mean, there are lots of grant programs, like DuPage County has a grant program
Right.
to switch your a detention basin into a native planted.
Okay. That's a good way, a source for financing, helping finance
Yeah.
your.
But if
your
you're a
map.
Downers Grove resident, and feel free to give me a call, and I'll be happy to talk through some options with you.
The next question is, how many staff help with the bioswale efforts, such as planning, communications, putting together the plant list in the handbook? What is the cost? Is it done with the village staff or contracted out?
So it's a little bit of both. I'm Julie with this. I'm the stormwater administrator with the village. I'm the one who manages the program. So I manage all the initial communication with the residents. And then we hire HLR to manage the actual installation. So I'll coordinate with HLR to go take a look at potential sites. They'll look at it and say, yes, this is a good site, or no, we need to do a little work to this one, or no, this just won't work at all. And then we have a budget of $30,000 per year for our bioswale program. And that is all for HLR's contracted work.
Great.
And then I'm the team lead on that. And then in the summer, luckily these bioswales are, they're not acres. So it's very easy to plant them. And I also have my little crew of summer interns that help me. I put them to work.
Perfect. The next question says that they said they have a small bioswale they put in last year, and then they got 6 inches of rain that came in July, which caused quite a bit of algae bloom, and the plants didn't like it. They said they put hydrogen peroxide in to help counteract that. But do you have any thoughts or ways to avoid algae bloom in very heavy rain times?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's a freak incident there. I couldn't think of anything. That's very interesting with the peroxide. Yeah, sometimes, I mean, the plants have deep root systems, but they can only handle so much. So when you have extreme conditions like that, that's hopefully not something that would be happening,
Consistently,
it sounds like it was a newer bioswale. So the bioswales become more effective over time. So that's the beauty of native plants, is the longer they've been in place, the more effective they are.
Exactly. In the first couple of years, the root systems are going to be small. And we always try to tell people too, when you have small plants that you're planting, the plants are going to spend more of their energy growing their roots and establishing themselves before they're flowering and beautiful and blooming. So in those first couple of years, when the plants are small, they're just trying really hard to grow their roots and to help soak up water. So yeah, if it's a new established one, it's not going to be able to hold as much water as it would in the next couple of years or the future.
Yeah, that's what we tell homeowners. We work with a lot of homeowners with conservation at home. We say in native plants takes about 3 years really to get well established. So it's a matter of patience too, getting them established. So what are, yeah, so
as much as we want that instant gratification, you gotta wait.
yeah, exactly. It's not like the annuals. So the question is, what herbicide did you use on the existing grass, and how long after application do you wait to plant the native plugs?
We waited 2 weeks after we sprayed it just to be sure. And what did we use? We switched this year and I can't remember the name of it. It's one that you have to get through a landscaping company that's water safe and frog safe, and for the life of me I cannot remember the name of it because it is new to me.
If you want to shoot Kristen an email,
yeah,
she can look it up and get back to you.
Yeah. And there's next two questions are actually what I wrote one down, said, if when a resident sells their home and, and the new resident is coming into the program, like, do you keep track of who has the bioswales? And also, how are the new homeowners educated so they don't take it out?
Yeah, so there's the requirement with the bioswale program is that they have to keep the bioswale for a year. And after that, if they want to switch it back to turf grass or whatever they want, that's their opportunity, but we will not pay to switch it back. Okay. So if someone sells their house, we would hope that they would stick with the bioswale, but there's no requirement. And we're certainly here, either myself or HLR, to assist with guidance. And we have copies of all of the booklets if they didn't get them from the previous homeowner.
Yeah, we have the same issue with conservation at home. A lot of times if a property is sold, sometimes the new homeowners take it out, which is sort of discouraging and sad. We have native plant rescues when that happens. So the next question is, are bioswales prevalent in an urban setting like Chicago?
So you need to have a ditch in order to have a bioswale. So a lot of Chicago has curb and gutter, not that you can't have a ditch with curb and gutter. So you could really put a bioswale anywhere as long as you can make a ditch. And it doesn't not necessarily have to be wet all the time. We installed one last summer that was dry all the time, but it was just steep and difficult to mow. So we just put in plants that are much easier to care for. So certainly bioswale or, rain garden is the same idea, but it's just not in a ditch. It's more of just a bowl. So they can be planted anywhere. Yeah, that's what I was saying. If you have a wet area in your yard, a rain garden is the option. It's just a different terminology, but it has the same effect. The question is, do you use amended soil for the bioswales?
Try to use what is already there. You want the native soil that the plants are going to, grow accustomed to. And I was actually just listening to a webinar on planting trees and how you can bring in new soil and for like planting around the ball, but the roots are going to, grow and travel underneath the home or underneath the yard where there's other soil. So you want to keep the soil that's been there. There's all these bioswales along the side of the road. And so some of them have erosion issues. And so, sometimes you're going to have to bring in some more supplemental soil to fill in to be able to plant. But you try to keep as much as what's already there.
Okay. Yeah. You want to make it easier for them to adapt. Someone asked, do you encourage burning?
Burning is great. I mean, it just depends on, your local fire department and ordinances. I know that we've had a couple residents that have reached out and would like to burn, but getting permits is kind of hard. And we contract out a company that will do prescribed burns for us, but they're not going to come out for a tiny little square.
Right.
So
Yeah,
you-
but as time goes on and we get more and more bioswales, who knows, maybe we'll look to hiring someone to do a burn of a bunch of them one
Right,
summer.
that would be so
Yeah.
amazing, because yeah, that would be great. You wouldn't have to worry about mowing, which, could be dangerous for the homeowner, because that's why they wanted to plant it in the first place. So to get some of that built up material out of there, burns would be fantastic.
Yeah. Next question is, what do you do if the resident doesn't do the upkeep?
So we do have a property maintenance ordinance. So if they weren't upkeeping it and it was getting unkept and the weeds were growing out of control, we would have to refer it over to code compliance, and they would work with the homeowner to either get it back under control or remove it. But again, this is a totally voluntary program, and the people that we've worked with so far are super excited and have all been maintaining them.
Good, good. How do these plants do in heavy clay soil?
Well, again, they're all native plants. So the idea is that they're used to growing in clay soil. Whereas if you got something that was not native to Illinois, it probably wouldn't do as well. And we have a lot of clay here in Downers Grove. And for the most part, the plants have all done really well.
They're thriving.
So people have mentioned the herbicide that you were trying to think of. Someone asked if it was Aquaneat or Rodeo. I think that's what they said. Was it one of those? I don't know what, they're asking if that was the one that you use. I don't know.
It was not.
Either.
I will have to go back and check, and I'll.
Okay. They were asking, is there an average cost to set up a bioswale, and how much do you budget for this? And I know you said how much you have your whole budget.
Yeah, so we have 30,000 in the whole budget, and that based on like last year, we were able to do 6 bioswales with that $30,000, and that includes everything from HLR, all of the meetings and the plantings and the herbicide and the maintenance and then the packets. So it's about $5,000 per bioswale.
And then someone asked that same question in chat too. I knew you had said the whole budget. The next question is, what type of plants do you put in areas that are underwater only in heavy rains and then dry when we have these hot drought-ridden summers? And how they fare when underwater and still young?
What's great about native plants is that Illinois' summers, you can have it really dry and you can have it really wet. So these plants can survive in the crazy, we're not planting pickerel weed that needs to be underwater all the time, but the irises, the prairie cordgrass, the swamp rose mallow, those like water and can stand being in high levels of water, but can also handle it being dry for a while. And luckily their roots are deep, so they're getting more water than we have up here. The second part of the question was, I'm sorry, you said.
Let me pull it back up.
When they're first planted, you can plant a plant. I think there's a ratio of how tall the plant is above the ground. So say you can plant a plant underwater like 3/4 of the way up and it'll survive. So if it's underwater for 3 months, it's not going to be too happy. But if it's a 2-week period of time where 3/4 of it is underwater, it'll still grow and survive. And then vice versa. If it's dry, it can handle that because they're native to here.
Right.
Yeah, which is another reason that we provide the first year of maintenance, so that if by chance the plants are not thriving in that environment, we'll replace them with something that will work better in that.
Oh, that's good. Someone said they must have missed it, but they were asking if there's a reduction in your stormwater fees. And I believe you said that there was, Julie, if they put in this, they reduce part of their fees, correct?
So not for the bioswale, but there is if they put a rain garden on their property. Because we're paying for the bioswale, so it wouldn't really make sense for us to pay for the bioswale and then give them an incentive.
Right, it was like $300 for the rain garden, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's all available on the website, or you can call me and I'll talk through different options.
Someone asked, do you have an inventory or database of the bioswale locations for maintenance and also to help document flood improvements?
So I have a list of them, and we have a lot of them on our parcel navigator on our GIS. I haven't gone through and had them update with the new ones yet, so that's on me to do, but we do have them shown on our parcel navigator. And then I have a list of them.
And that's a question. Another question was, are you estimating water quality benefits resulting from the program? They asked if you can talk about some other green infrastructure initiatives in Downers Grove that complement this program.
Sure. So we have not tried to measure the water quality benefits from it, but certainly, anytime you put native plants in, there is definitely a water quality benefit, especially when you're putting it in your stormwater management system where your water is flowing through. But we've done a number of other things. We have over at Second and Cumner, we put in a wetland basin that provides water quality benefits as well as some flood control. We have permeable pavers on Grove Street. We have a number of mechanical separators. So the stormwater will come into there and then all of the solids will settle out. We vacuum those out periodically. And then again, the incentives on either lowering the impervious on their property or using things like rain gardens on their property to help with water quality benefits.
Good. Someone asked, do the bioswales include an underground storage layer? And I'm not sure what they mean. I don't know if they mean like, I've seen those cells, they look like grates underneath. I don't know if that's what they're talking about. There's
right. Yeah, so no, we just plant them in the native soil. So we don't do, we found that it's best to, again, this is some of the lessons learned, that it works best if you just take the native soil and plant them in there, because that's what native plants are ready for. And sometimes people put an underdrain in rain gardens or bioswales, but sometimes that can actually drain them too quickly. So far we found that just using the native soil the way it is has worked best.
That's great. And John, let me know, it's SIVA cells. I think pronouncing that correctly. I couldn't remember the name of it, and that's what the cells.
Yeah, those are more for trees.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And says Chicago requires a bioswale mixed with sand. Is this necessary?
No.
I was gonna say the natives, like you said, adapt really well.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And when people install new rain gardens, we typically have them put some amended soils, like a mix of topsoil and sand and mulch or something. And a lot of times it's because that soil is already disturbed.
Right. Yeah, and so those are all the questions that we have. Great questions. And, I wrote down the same ones that some of the other people had. And someone did ask if the plants are resistant to road salt. And you did mention that in the presentation, that the plants that you select, they are resistant to road salt, the ones you select, correct?
As much as possible, yeah.
As much as possible, yeah. If you dump salt directly on it, that's not going to be good.
Right, exactly.
You might not be too happy with that, but.
Right. So with that, we're a little early again for the break. The next presentation is going to start at 10 o'clock. And the next presentation is Tim Poway and Rebecca Grill, the preserves of Highland Park. It's a conversion from a golf course to an interactive nature experience. So we're excited to have that coming up. And with that, go ahead, take your break, and we'll be back in a little bit. Hi, we got a couple minutes here. I was waving and then I realized my camera was off. So we're going to have a couple more minutes before we're going to start here. And also I wanted to mention that I'm just making the introductions with the titles, but if you want more information about the speakers, it's in the agenda. So if you want to find out more about them, you can find it there. And at the end, they always have their email to contact about some of their work here. We got 2 more minutes. I don't want to start too early in case people have gone for a break and they think we're starting right at 10 o'clock. And as I mentioned, we have our upcoming native plant sale. So if you need some native plants, we'll be happy to, it's online ordering only, you pre-order it. And after you pre-order, you pick it up. And in May, I don't have my dates here. It was on the shared, the video there that we, or the shared, the, can't think, the slide presentation that I had rotating there. So I had some information about that as far as dates and stuff that are coming up. So the plant sale is the ordering online is going to be from April 15th to April 26th. It opens and it closes at noon on the 26th. And the pickup dates for the plant sale are May 13th and 14th. And the same for the vegetable orders. The vegetable orders will go on sale over the weekend, May 6th and 7th, and the pickup is going to be at our office. So with that, I am just going to go ahead and let's see, get this. Introduce our next speakers. The preserves of Highland Park, Tim Poway, who is a senior landscape architect with Hay and Associates, and then Rebecca Grill, who is a natural areas management with the Park District of Highland Park. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. It's 10 a.m. and let's get started.
Tim, you're on mute.
There we go. Sorry. Good morning, everyone. I'm Tim, and as Dan mentioned, with me this morning is Rebecca Grill. And we're going to talk about the preserve of Highland Park. And why is it not advancing? We had this all worked out yesterday.
Yes, we did.
There we go.
Here we go.
The preserve of Highland Park was the conversion of the old Highland Park Country Club to a passive recreation nature area. That was involved quite a public input process. And with that, we'll just get into it and tell you about the planning and design and then eventually the implementation.
Thanks, Tim. So like many of the projects we've heard about today, this is really a story about a long-term commitment to open space and natural areas planning by our community, involving lots of partners, lots of community members, and many meetings, as you will see. So like many golf courses in the Chicago area, the Highland Park Country Club is adjacent to, in fact, straddles the Skokie River, the East Fork of the North Branch of the Chicago River. And it is in the floodplain. And I love this picture. We took it, obviously, before we did work out there. I remember a neighbor showing me pictures of this flooded land and saying, you know, how are you ever going to make this work? How are you going to get anything to grow? Because did you know it floods? So this is kind of the story of taking what is a problem area, a flooding area, and turning it into a tremendous community resource that not only benefits our people, our community, but wildlife and obviously water quality and on-site flooding protections. Advance the slides, thank you. So as I said, this was a long-term project. In 2002, the Park District, the City of Highland Park, Lake County Lake County Forest Preserve District, and IDNR were approached and ended up acquiring an adjacent parcel, which is now called the Skokie River Woods. This was a 24-acre parcel that was set for development. As you can see, that's a picture of it there after we did our restoration work. You know, clearly in an area where we do have flooding, this was a great opportunity to preserve this land as open space, but also for its water retention capacity. I mentioned also the Highland Park Woods. At the time when we acquired Skokie River Woods, all of those agencies created a series of conservation easements. One, of course, went on Skokie River Woods, but also they were placed on this little 10-acre parcel of woods that was on the east corner of the golf course. And then also, interestingly, because thinking ahead for open space purposes, placed a conservation easement over the golf course property. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. So 42 years in the making and then some. One of my favorite headlines, as if you guys see my my view here, is Highland Park Country Club golf course transition inches toward fruition. And I guess that's been our motto here, but a lot of preparation, a lot of community involvement. Beginning in 1976, when the country club opened as a private club, up into 1993, when the city of Highland Park purchased that land, including the Highland Park Woods property. As I mentioned, in 2002, the city acquired Skokie River Woods, and those conservation easements were laid on all of these properties. In 2010, the Park District, while the city owns Skokie River Woods, the Park District manages it. So with funding we received from the Lake County Stormwater Management Commission, we completed a restoration project in Skokie River Woods, and that actually won a Best Management Project Award in 2016. In 2018, at this point, the city had, by prior agreement, turned management of the golf course over to the Park District of Highland Park. That was arranged for at the time the city purchased the golf course. We began to look at our community and our needs and determined that the best course of action for the community as a whole would be to shut down golf operations at the country club at the same time as we were renovating the Park District Sunset Valley Golf Course. So in essence, we had two large publicly owned golf courses and requested to shut down operations at the country club. So there were many meetings and between the parties, the city, the Forest Preserve District, and of course the community. And we began to form advisory committees. And interestingly, we were able to start to turn over the land into our preferred restoration practice. So if we could go ahead. So our aim was to take this land, it's approximately 100 acres. As I mentioned, there's conservation easement on it, so we could not do a lot of building, if any at all. We're working in a floodplain situation, and so there's all of the watershed development ordinance requirements placed upon it. But we saw all of this as an opportunity to take 50 acres of that out of turf grass and restore that with native plantings. There are also some ponds in that property. As many of you, if you golf, you know about water hazards. We have a few. So those shorelines existed and provided additional opportunities for habitat. We wanted to use some of the existing features on the course, sand traps, some of the hills that were there, the ponds, and make this a fun destination. This park is in very close proximity to our downtown Highland Park. There is an existing bike path that links our downtown areas with our northern neighborhoods and the community of Highwood. So we wanted to have it a place for people who might not necessarily seek out a forest preserve or our Heller Nature Center, and to come and enjoy nature on their terms. We call it nature with parking. So we have destinations out on this property, specialized gardens, nature play areas, and overlooks, and Tim and I will be talking a lot more in detail about that. So why restoration? First of all, we needed to fulfill our conservation vision for the property. We wanted to increase the capacity of the land to absorb stormwater by pooling approximately 50 acres of turf grass out of operation. We wanted to use native plants to improve water quality, as well as just the simple act of taking it out of golf operations and reducing the amount of chemical load being put down on there to maintain a golf course level standards. We saw opportunities with the wetlands on the property, all that flooding, to provide habitat for birds and pollinators, and we have a special focus on turtles, which we'll talk a little bit more about that. And just a rare opportunity, as I mentioned before, to bring nature right back to our backyards. So getting started, the Park District contracted with Hay & Associates, and Tim obviously was lead on that team. And one of the first things we did was an inundation study and analysis of the water flow paths. So as I said, the west side of the property is the Skokie River. The water is flowing across the property into the river. And if you see those purple lines, those are hydrologic paths, flow paths that we identified. Of course, the areas that are flooding are kind of in a blue shape there. And we use that information to develop our planting plan. And this is one of my favorite parts of this project, is the way that the green areas that you see there, which are turf grass, which we left, are interspersed or intertwined, wrapped around by the native plantings, so that as you walk through the property, and most of the pathways are north-south oriented, you are walking in and out of manicured spaces and then natural areas. So we left those turf grass spaces for programs, for picnics, rentals, pick up baseball games, whatever the community desires, but also introduce people to the look and feel of the native aesthetic. Tim?
There were several funding opportunities that presented themselves, including an OSLAD grant, which is Open Space Land Acquisition and Development. But one of the other ones that was more specific towards water quality was a 319 grant from Lake County Stormwater Management Commission. That was to, well, initially we're going to restore a couple of the ponds on site. After some discussions in planning and design, we moved that to the large pond, and then also planted, we just, last presentation talked a lot about bioswales. There was 2 large drainage ways where runoff from adjacent properties came through the golf course. So we planted 2 large bioswales that were the drainage ways coming across the site. Anything to add?
I would just add that a lot of the purpose of that planting was to provide water quality. We did a complete regrade and sections of that pond. There were steep areas, erosion areas, so the funding provided for regrading and then planting. So water quality in terms of sediment control, and also, of course, phosphorus loading. And that grant was in the amount of $144,000 and some change. So next slide. This is our pandemic moment. We got started, as I said, in 2018 with our advisory committees and starting with our native plantings. I think someone mentioned 3 years to get things established, so that was working well with our plans. We held in 2019 approximately 40 meetings. We had a public advisory committee, we had staff advisory committee, and we had, of course, our partners from the city and county and eventually the state who participated in those meetings. In December of 2019, as Tim mentioned, we received our Clean Water Act grant for the shoreline. January 2020, we received a very significant award from IDNR for open space acquisition and development in the amount of $400,000, and then the world shut down. So we were kind of on pause for a while. Meantime, we were working with the City of Highland Park and Lake County Forest Preserve District to approve the master plan that was developed through those 40 public meetings that I mentioned. So that got going and agreed upon in March of 2020. We were not able to get our funding agreements completed, all of them, until August of that year. However, we did, and then we put it out to bid, and Team Rail, which is a family-owned business locally in the Chicago area, was awarded the contract. The initial contract was for $1.2 million, and that included shoreline restoration. It included the amenities that we'll be talking about in a minute, and a great deal of trail work, which we'll also mention the importance of. Let's see, is there anything else I wanted to mention on that topic? I don't think so. So Tim, you want to take it away, and we're going to kind of look backwards a little bit at what our advisory committee and our master plan sprung from.
Yeah, so during those 40 meetings that Rebecca mentioned, we had a lot of community input on what different folks wanted to see, what staff wanted to see, what staff could maintain. But we came up with these different amenities. The idea was not to develop the whole 50 or 100 acres, but to have smaller spaces within the larger space, these fun destinations where people could go and recreate. And of course, one of the main things with any park or large open space is you have to have, you know, an entry space so people know that they arrived. So we came up with a small entry plaza, includes some seating, native plants around it. The plaza itself was made with permeable pavers. Can also be used for program activities. If there's something going on at the preserve, you know, that's where folks can check in or get directions on where to go and all that. The North Pond was the biggest pond on site, and we wanted to have an overlook. There was a lot of interest in the pond. Everything from, hey, can you put a boat launch on it, to, hey, can people swim in it? And it's like, well, that's probably not quite the right thing for this site. But we did want to have an overlook, again, a little plaza area with permeable pavers in front of the overlook deck. A lot of interest in sort of getting people out into the pond, but, you know, some safety concerns with that, with getting too far out over the water. So we actually decided to excavate the sides of the pond, or the sides next to the overlook, so that when you were out on the overlook, you felt like you were, again, in the middle of a wetland next to the pond. And some of the rock outcropping you can see on the sides there was intended to be it could be informal seating, or again, if you're having programmed activities like a nature camp or something, it gives the opportunity to step down towards the created wetlands, but not quite going out into the pond itself. Also had a pollinator garden. One of the earlier ideas on this was to have like a foraging garden, because there were a few apple trees that we found out in the middle of the golf course. Thought, hey, it might be fun to have, you know, a spot where people can go and pick their lunch. Again, some concerns, you know, with that sort of thing, maintenance, and just, you know, if people just go out and start eating everything. So it turned into more of a pollinator garden for butterflies and other species. Actually created a couple bee berms, which repurposed some of the sand from the sand traps on the golf course and created these small berms for ground nesting bees. Still did include some apple trees and other edibles that can be used in more programmed activities. Installed a nature maze, so put in a small gathering space, again, using natural rock for benches rather than, you know, something, you know, manufactured, but just hedges of native shrubs to create a nature maze. A portion of it's actually has a hard finish surface, stabilized decomposed granite, so it's accessible. And other parts of it are just turf, but again, the native shrubs stay low enough that, you know, parents can sit and while their kids run through it and have a good time. Then the big wetland overlook, Rebecca mentioned Skokie River Woods. We wanted to have a nice overlook to see all the wetlands and the restored habitats in Skokie River Woods. So came up with this big overlook, again, another little plaza at the entry to it with permeable pavers. The idea to have this overlook get up into the canopy of some of the trees surrounding it, so that people could really sort of get out and experience nature and have this view of, it's just an incredible view over the wetlands, and you're up in the trees. So it's a really incredible spot.
So once we got our bids out and our contracts permitting arranged, it was time to bring all these plans into reality. And I worked with my boss, Dan Boss, who is the director of parks, and the rest of our team here with Hay and Associates and Team Real to make this happen. An important part of our park district staff responsibility, we made a decision early on to keep this property open during our construction as best we could for public enjoyment. We had to manage a lot of expectations. We didn't really discuss it, but if you see on that sign, there are black marks indicating homes and a couple of condo buildings there on the northeast side of the property. These are neighbors who purchased their homes and their condos as a golf course in their backyard. And so we worked very hard to acknowledge that we were changing the landscape. Members of the homeowners association and the condo association were of our advisory committee, and you know, keeping them advised and keeping the general public advised of just some of those things that our earlier speakers are talking about, and the lag time it can take to get plants established, and you know, when were we going to start construction, et cetera, et cetera. We used our web communications and our communication staff here at Park District pretty effectively to try to as I say, manage those expectations, keep our stakeholders updated, and you know, keeping track of our progress for the public. Go advance. So one thing I wanted to mention that I think was incredibly important, as I said that we kept our property open during construction. Well, that meant during 2020, even though we had just begun our restoration efforts, but not our construction, we kept the property open. And during that time when people were just able to get out of their homes and emerge from being isolated, it was very important that this property was there and it was well used by people who felt safe and comfortable walking its many trails. There's about 5 or 6 miles of trails combined with the country club, the bike route on the east, and then its connection over to the gateway path to the west. So a very important part, we felt, of providing our mission of keeping our community healthy, and then also you know, giving them access to natural open spaces. So I will show you a little bit of the results. Tim showed you the concepts. Here's the realities. This is the entry plaza. These pictures don't show some key factors, but we have, in the place of those small temporary signs, a welcome sign at this location that shows all of the amenities in a simple graphic along with the trail routes, so that people can just get a sense of what's out there, what they might want to explore. Small amount of copy explaining it. To the right of that is going to be one of our large welcome signs with the park map. So getting people to get out there and enjoy the park, part of that is helping to guide them to know where to go. Go ahead. Next. Here's the North Pond overlook. I think that this above all looks the most like the concept plans. Just the way that we were able to bring the pond back. I think it created quite a cool element and was what the vision we had in mind was. Up there on the right corner, that's some of our turtle habitat. That was kind of funny. We put our logs into the water, and a couple days later they had floated across the pond, which is fine, and were well populated by turtles. So apparently the turtles knew what they wanted. It's adaptive management, right? This pollinator garden, this was planted out by McGinty Brothers under subcontract to Team Real. Very managed look with the decomposed gravel pathways, the seating. We want people to have the sense of an area that is tended. So while we have our 50 acres of native plantings, we also have these specialized gardens that are pruned and weeded and mulched, just again to give people that sense of aesthetics, but also to let them feel a sense of stewardship on the property. Go ahead. So here's one of our turtles. Took this picture on site. The turtle meadow was a fun idea that some of the staff at Hay and Associates came up with to provide habitat, nesting habitat for the turtles that we know are on site. Turtles require a sandy substrate and full sun. That's sometimes why you see them on the roadside. They are seeking that kind of an environment in a world that doesn't have a lot of it left for them. So we created 3 or 4 of these turtle meadows that are going to be monitored by us and protected, so that if we build it, they will come, we hope. And you can see in the background, the pond is to the south of this area. We even mowed them a trail, so I don't know about that one, but we'll see. Maybe we need signage. I should mention that we had a high school student, Shana Zavell, who helped us with this project. She researched the requirements for turtle habitat, helped us draw up a couple of interpretive signs, and design that area. Here's our nature maze. Sorry, thanks, Tim. Back to the nature maze. Our nature maze in the making, McGinty staff there. Again, the theme here was native shrubs with the take of how they support birds. So we had already identified over 70 species of birds that were using the preserve. We have a connection with Lake Cook Audubon, and one of their members had been tracking that over time and turned that data over to us. So we knew it was important to provide fruiting shrubs that attracted would be beneficial to insectivores, and support those resident and migratory birds that are passing through here. We are not too far at this point from Lake Michigan, so we're on that Lake Michigan flyway, and we wanted to provide for those creatures. Next, we have our sand play area. I mentioned that we wanted to take a play off on the sand bunkers. So in an area where 2 sand bunkers were sitting side by side, we created a sand play area. And the feature of that was 2 turtle climbing mounds. They were done with pour in place material, and they represent spotted and painted turtles with accompanying interpretive signage that I mentioned. This is both of those areas in progress. There's a picnic area there as well, and a sand table for filter play for the kids. This area is pretty close to the recreation center, to the country club building itself. So we envision this as something that families could easily make their way out to for a short spurt of play activity, and have a picnic lunch. And again, just trying to think through how people might use this property and draw them out to the level that they were comfortable doing.
Because I'll just add the the image on the right there was before the whole area was backfilled with sand that was salvaged out of other sand traps. So the idea here was that it looked like there were these turtle shells in and amongst the sand, getting a little playful, hopefully having fun. Hopefully everybody gets it when they go out there to climb on it. But it's really just the same sort of play mounds you'd see at a traditional playground. But here they're designed to look like turtles, and with the interpretive signage, hopefully it gives some information and education to folks on other things that are happening out here, sort of a fun way.
Yeah, great addition. Thank you. So finally, the wetland overlook. As Tim mentioned, this looks out over the main portion of the wetland area on Skokie River Woods, the adjacent property. You can't see it in this picture, but it's a significant heron rookery just to the north of that area, which you can observe from there. And we also have sandhill cranes on the property, so that kind of marshy, emergent kind of habitat is very much to their liking. And knock on wood, we seem to have a pair that returns to our site each year. So that's a fun thing. And the signage at this location discusses wetlands and how important they are in terms of diversity and water quality benefits, flooding control. So then we, had to deal with the details. One thing I'll point out on the left, that picture shows an important part of our strategy for stewardship. In fact, it kind of came out of a community advisory committee members' commentary. Make sure that you have edges on your pathways so that people don't feel overwhelmed by the native plantings. So most everywhere on our trails, we have 5 feet of mown edge on both sides. That area, we also intend for people to be able to do cross-country skiing along those edges. And also, we are working with our Highland Park High School cross-country club to create a practice route through the park for them. Their high school is not too far off from the park. Lots of seeding. I guess the middle picture represents our hydromulching that we used primarily to restore those pathways. We didn't want to end up with a lot of miles and miles of erosion control blanketing. So SMC approved our use of hydromulch to stabilize the areas. There's just some of our great grass seed. We had a lot of issues with weather on this project, but one thing that we did have was great weather to grow grass this past year. So we were able to button everything up. That was one of the things we thought was going to be a concern, but turned out just fine. You never know, right? And then finally, finishing touches. I mentioned signage. We have a donation bench program at the Park District. So that is how we are funding park type benches throughout the property. Waste containers, those were actually provided in part by our OSLEG grant. Those were installed. And I thought you guys might be interested. Our communications team helped us with actually branding this property in terms of our signage. And they went out and took photos of the property in season and created this swath of colors, this palette of colors that we use in our signage and our communications about the property. So kind of love that. And then I guess finally, we have our thanks and our acknowledgements, of course, all of our partners that I have mentioned, city, Lake County Forest Reserve, Lake County SMC, IDNR, our funding, and then our companies. I should not hesitate to mention, or I should remember to mention, the 3 companies that was the contract to do our initial native seeding and management. So a tremendous help and great professionalism from that company, because there again, we were turning a floodplain into native plantings, and for a while there we had mud flats, but we got through that phase. So Tim, unless you had something else you wanted to mention, I think we could take questions.
Yeah, the only thing that I thought of might be worth mentioning is we talked about, trails through the site before. Most of those were old golf cart paths. Some of the golf cart paths had to be reconstructed because they were in pretty bad shape. We took out a bunch of golf cart paths, added a few new in to connect. The cart paths did sort of traverse and crisscross the site, but they were intended to play golf, not to have a leisurely stroll through a park in a natural area. So I had to rework them a bit, but yeah, just to mention that the cart paths were largely formed the trail system through the site. But again, some of those were removed and a few segments were added just to make more looping trails because, some of the golf cart things, you go out and then you come back and then you go out that way and didn't make for effective strolls through the park.
Yeah, thank you.
I think with that, we could maybe open it up for questions, Jan.
Sure. We have the first question is, what do the long-term maintenance provisions look like?
Sure, we have money budgeted right now. It's in our capital account for maintenance of the 50 acres. And that is actually going out for bid soon. The initial contract we had completed this year. We also have brought on a full-time staff member who will be assigned to this park during the growing season to assist us with the gardens and mowing. We do our mowing of the grass in-house. Yeah.
Okay, great. Question was the floodplain area left as a floodplain to prevent future flooding downstream? There's two questions. So that's the first question.
Mm-hmm. So yes.
Okay.
That's part of kind of like the permitting is you need to make sure that you are not filling any floodplains. And in fact, I believe, and Tim will correct me, I'm sure, we actually came out on the plus side of creating a little tiny bit more space there. But what we hope to do was enhance those floodplains with those native plants and return that natural function to allow the uptake of water in the areas that traditionally flooded, possibly some infiltration of sediment, et cetera, by those plants. So we consider this a wetland improvement by virtue of those native plants that we put in there in those wet areas.
Yeah, and just to add to that, well, statewide regulations, and particularly in Lake County, you can't just fill floodplains without at least compensating. There was a net gain in floodplain storage area. And this site is actually about half floodway, which is sort of a subset of floodplain. You consider floodplain as the area that just sort of floods. Floodway is the area that's required to convey the flood past the particular site. So there was a lot of concern with not adding fill to this. Plus, through some of the excavation, there is some extra storage on site. And as Rebecca mentioned, with the conversion from traditional landscape to native landscape, hopefully we're managing that stormwater even better.
Great. A question was, how were these results received by the homeowners bordering the property?
Sure, we get a lot of people. I meet them on the path. That's my main area of communication, and we get a lot of great compliments. A lot of people have told us what a lifesaver. Maybe that's an exaggeration of a bit, but how great it was to be able to walk out on those paths during the pandemic. We maintain our contact with our advisory committee members, and believe me, we do hear from them. But it has become more of a partnership of, hey, did you know that, something, a tree has fallen over here. So kind of keeping us alert to things on the property. And I think one of the greatest things perhaps is there's a beautiful remnant savanna on the property just north of the Highland Park Woods property that was actually on the Legacy Club, the condo property, not ours. So we cleared everything up to there, and then there was the usual band of buckthorn. And this winter they hired somebody and they went out and they cut that buckthorn down, and now our oak savanna is whole. So I thought
that's
that was a
great.
great thing. Yeah.
You mentioned your presentation. You said if you build it, they'll come. Have the homeowners mentioned any, like, seeing more of the animals and stuff coming back, or have they mentioned what they've seen now?
Yes, in good and bad ways, you know. I had a resident ask me just how many birds we were planning to bring. It was a hard question to answer.
Yeah. You're not importing them, right? Yeah. Tim, did you have anything else to add?
No, one of the fun things like related to wildlife, and I haven't seen them lately, but I know for a while there was a coyote that liked to sit out next to the North Pond, and every time you'd go out, you're like, oh, there's a dog. Oh, that's not a dog. It's a resident coyote that was over there, but there's plenty of open space. Don't know if he's still around there, but you know, lots of wildlife.
Yeah, I think
Great.
that's right.
So let's see. Oh, someone said they love the sandy area that was put in for the turtles. So
Great. We
So-
do
so-
too.
So with that, there's no more questions at this time. So with that, we're going to go ahead and take our break then, and then we're going to be starting again at 10:45. And thank you, Tim and Rebecca, for presenting. I really appreciate you being here today and presenting their project. It was very interesting. So with that, we're going to go on to the break, and the next presentation is the role of community-based partnerships, advancing DEI in the water industry. And I'm looking forward to seeing that, and we'll go ahead and take a break. And if any of you are interested, we have some upcoming programs that I wanted to mention while we're here. And on March 10th, we have this is a program that is put on in partnership with DuPage County Stormwater Management. It's like a lunch and learn from 12 to 1. And I will send a link out with the other information I'm sending tomorrow, so you can register for this program if you're interested. It's non-source phosphorus reduction study. The speaker is Stephen McCracken, who is the director of the DuPage River Salt Creek Work Group. It's a study they did for DuPage County Stormwater Management, discussing that and ways to reduce leaf waste and other elements going into the waterways in our area. The next workshop with the county is on April 14th, and we'll be having that. We'll post a link after that workshop. It's on April 14th, and that's from 12 to 1. And it's green infrastructure plant selection and design tools. And the speaker is Jason Cooper, who is a senior landscape architect with environmental consulting technology. And then on March 2nd, we are putting on a webinar. It's from 7 to 8 p.m. So it's in the evening, and it's creating your plant sales shopping list. And that list is based on some of the plants we are going to be selling in the plant sale. So if you can tune in on that, and Nancy Sonato and I will be presenting that. And if you can't make it, you can register. We'll send you the recording. And also we will be posting that on our website, on our YouTube channel. And I'm going to put up here our, let's see, I'll put this information up here too, so you can see what I'm talking about. This is our native plant sale. Oops, it switched to that one. Stop share for some reason. But anyway, so we have that's coming up. And also on March 9th, if you're in the Fox River area, the river flows through it. It's a monthly meeting they have there from 7 to 8 p.m. in St. Charles. It's a Fox River program series. And it's in St. Charles at the Baker Community Center. And also, if you're interested, Jim Kleinwachter will be leading a workshop called Rain Barrels, Rain Gardens, and Other Conservation Practices on March 27th from 1 to 3. And it's long because he's doing the presentation. Following the presentation, you can do a tour of our farm, the McDonald farm. And the tour is at 2 o'clock. And you can also, if you're interested, purchase a rain barrel from us and pick it up at that time. So we have a couple more minutes before that. And I will also, someone asked if they could send out information about the plant sale. And I will be sending that out to everyone in the links that we have coming up. And we have a couple minutes. I'm looking at my watch before we start. And I don't want to start too early in case some people want to break and they think we're coming back at, at 10:45 and they don't want to miss you guys speaking. And I'm looking forward to seeing that presentation also. And with that, let's see what else. Oh, and as I mentioned, the DuPage River Sweep is coming up on May 21st. You can register, you go to our website and you can register online. We've been doing this program for 31 years. We've removed over 300 tons of trash from the rivers and the waterways here. And you can sign up when you register. I will assign you a site according to where you live. So if you're in DuPage County and the surrounding region, we'd love to have you volunteer and help with keep our rivers and streams clean. If you're a group, I keep you together so you can go together. We provide the grabbers, pokers, gloves, trash bags. American Rivers provides the trash bags for us for that program. So it's a great program we've been doing for a long time. And we've had, each year we have about 600 to 700 volunteers for that program. So it gets overwhelming sometimes, but it's a lot of fun. So with that, I am going to go ahead and introduce our speakers. The role of community-based partnerships in advancing DEI in the water industry. Laura Adams is the Green Infrastructure Practice Lead at Black & Veatch. And Michael Burke is Director of Business Inclusion and Capacity Development at the Clean Water Partnership, CWP. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Jan. And as you were talking about the river cleanup, you reminded me that in Kansas City, in Kansas City, we have some awards, like the craziest thing you've found in the river. And there are some pretty exceptional finds that happen. So I wanted to thank you for the introduction. We are excited to be here and share updates on an emerging approach to infrastructure delivery that's called community-based partnerships. And the goal of this presentation today is to empower you all to understand why and how alternate delivery of projects can benefit your community. To deliver the solutions that we're going to talk about, my team works very closely with my colleague Michael Burke and an integrated and multidisciplinary team at Corvius, and then of course local design partners and contractors on the ground in the partnerships that we're working on. So Michael and I, again, are pleased to be here. And as you mentioned, Jan, my name is Laura Adams, and I lead Black & Veatch's Green Infrastructure practice. Our own team at Black & Veatch has developed green infrastructure, stream restoration, and sustainable planning projects across the country. And we're leading the programs and design, overseeing construction, and also guiding maintenance. We are driven to collaborate on innovative solutions that really support communities, restore natural resources, and address climate resiliency. So looking for that triple bottom line impact. Michael, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Burke. I am the Director of Business Inclusion and Capacity Development for the Clean Water Partnership. I've been involved with that since February of 2016. So this is a long-running program. And my work prior to that has been around other large P3 projects where I've been hired to source and help grow capacity for small and local businesses and communities on large public-private partnerships. And I'm looking forward to talking to you about what we're doing at the Clean Water Partnership.
Thanks, Michael. Before we dive in, I wanted to take a moment and thank the Conservation Foundation for hosting this event, and then all the attendees for the work that you're doing in your communities. You're really elevating the status of stormwater management and across multiple departments, as we saw the chat populate with everyone's titles this morning and the roles that you're playing. The other thing I was thinking is Edith in her first, Edith in her first call, in her presentation, she talked about the importance of acknowledging success stories as part of the climate action plan. And the presentations that we've just watched, if I could give you guys awards, you would have them. Those were fantastic stories of work that's going on in the region. We also want to thank you for making time to join us. We know there are a lot of other demands on your time. So the session today is going to focus on the emerging practice of community-based partnerships, some of the key performance indicators of how these partnerships deliver watershed-based resiliency, and also then how they elevate diversity, equity, and inclusion through a focus on contractor capacity building. And that's what Michael's really going to talk about and hone in on to hopefully inspire you. Our goal for this presentation is to empower you all to understand how this type of model can benefit communities, and then how it can be used to facilitate implementation of distributed green infrastructure solutions. And I apologize, I thought I had turned off the automatic advance, but it just keeps kicking forward, trying to speed me up.
Trying to speed you up, that's it.
Yeah. So first, let's establish a basic understanding and just introduce the community-based partnership model. It's important to acknowledge the drivers for the infrastructure investment, and we've heard about a lot of those today through the other presentations. Counties and municipalities in the United States face challenging obligations to manage aging stormwater infrastructure. And then that challenge that you guys are facing is compounded by things like population growth, water quality protection requirements, funding concerns. So these challenges have made it worthwhile to rethink how infrastructure solutions are delivered and how our assets are managed. Innovations around the delivery and management are relevant if you're talking about large facilities or if you're talking about distributed green infrastructure solutions. So one approach to address these challenges is the community-based public-private partnership model. And this is an alternative delivery approach that was established in partnership with the EPA back in 2014. So you heard that Michael's been working on it since 2016. He's really been part of it since the beginning. In general, in the simplest terms, it's a partnership between a local government and a private partner. So it's very much like the Downers Grove Bioswale project, right? You've got a public entity and then a private partner who are working together to implement something. The difference here in the community-based public-private partnership is that it's focused on outcome metrics. So the private partner agrees to perform some delegated management services to build infrastructure while delivering on some broad policy goals and objectives that have actually been collaboratively established with the local government. As I mentioned, this model was established in 2014 in partnership with EPA Region 3. And the team that coalesced to establish this partnership involved Prince George's County, Maryland, the Department of Environment, the EPA, and then the private sector as well. And that group convened to define this new model of partnership and delivery of infrastructure. Again, a key tenet is that this is a partnership at the very core. So the private partner and the government partner, you're in it together, and you define the goals of the program to be relevant to the community. That means that as part of the program framing, the partners establish performance indicators or key performance indicators that define the metrics used to evaluate success. So with this delivery model, a local government or private utility usually aggregates a lot of different projects, a lot of small projects into a single integrated procurement, and it creates one point of private sector accountability. The contract, as I mentioned, is based on performance. So payment is linked to specific measurable goals. And in addition to these metrics, the private partner assumes the budget risk, the schedule risk, and then creates, and that, sorry about that, creates some accountability in delivering the best value over a life cycle. So the private partner is really incentivized to identify and prioritize projects that meet these metrics that are specific to the community, but also to identify and prioritize projects that ensure the highest return on investment. And that means that the program goals inform everything from the sourcing and selection of the projects all the way through the construction and maintenance and delivery. I think it's also important to note that for the programs and partnerships that Michael and I are involved in, there's a third-party certifier that's responsible for characterizing performance and certifying the work. So you have both the public and the private entity that are part of that partnership have a third party or a transparent system for making sure that the performance metrics are being met. Historically, the partnerships that we have teamed with are established in a way to really elevate the local workforce. And I wanted Michael to share some additional context on that, kind of generally, broadly for the partnerships.
I think one of the things when you see performance-based and program goals, a little bit about Prince George's County. Prince George's County is about 15 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. It's a very diverse county. There are 900,000 residents in Prince George's County. So if you get a sense for that, it's 9 council districts in the county with the 27 municipalities. One of the things about the county is that the county has had very significant enforcement of program goals for small, local, and minority businesses. And the partnership, the CWP, or the Clean Water Partnership, has some very significant goals for incentive. Those goals would include a 51% resident participation goal and a 50% small local business and minority business contracting goal. So 50% of this program. And we'll talk more about that further into the presentation, but just to give you some sense of what we're working with here in the county. Because we're close to DC, we have an urban component of the county, and we also have a very residential / open land conservation space in the county as well. And Laura will talk more about where we're situated as it relates to the watersheds, et cetera.
Yeah, thank you. The that workforce is that structure of the team is very focused, as Michael said, to elevate the local design firms and local contractors, both as general contractors and small business subcontractors. And yeah, thanks for explaining that and giving some context.
Sure.
So let's talk about some of the metrics and use Prince George's County and the Clean Water Partnership as a as a case study. Michael is going to focus more on the equity and inclusion metrics, and I want to talk a little bit about the water quality and the watershed-based water quality improvements. But first, paint the picture of why Chesapeake Bay, why Prince George's County, and why this started here. So I feel like it's really important to acknowledge that Chicagoland has an outstanding and inspired history of green infrastructure implementation. And we heard about it today through the climate action planning work that you're doing, through the open space project, the golf course, and the Ditch the Ditches program, the green roof work. There's a lot of great work that's been done in Chicago. But it's always worthwhile to step back and see what other places are doing and what you can learn from them. So we wanted to take a look with you guys at one of the areas in the country with also a very long history of green infrastructure implementation. And that's the Chesapeake Bay. So the Chesapeake Bay, just to kind of get oriented, is the largest inlet in the Atlantic coastal plain. And up until the 1970s, it supported vast populations of marine life, but it was significantly damaged by both residential and industrial development. Conservation practices that have been implemented over the last decades have improved water quality in the bay, But there are two areas that are still a target, and that is agricultural pollution and urban runoff, and those still remain a challenge. The leading causes of poor water quality in the Bay are excessive nutrients and excessive sediments. So to address the water quality challenges within these local watersheds, Prince George's County started a process back in 2005, actually, and they created the first ever county-wide green infrastructure plan. That plan set the foundation and vision for conserving environmental ecosystems. And then in 2010, the county approved an environmental technical manual to support implementation of that plan. The momentum in Prince George's County and has just continued. And again, it was in 2015 that the county's leadership partnered with EPA and established an RFQ process to pursue the first community-based public-private partnership. In that process, they selected Corvius Infrastructure Solutions as the long-term private partner to help the county achieve the compliance goals at a large scale, at a faster scale, at a lower cost. Those were some of the goals. And the idea was, how can we use an environmental mandate as an opportunity for local economic development and environmental literacy? And then how can we track that, as you guys are talking about with the projects that you've discussed this morning? So the Clean Water Partnership was established to bring an innovative solution and a different structure of delivery to help the county address regulatory requirements. This is a 30-year partnership. And as I mentioned, it's managed by Corvius, who is the private partner. It was initially created to retrofit 2,000 impervious acres with green infrastructure. And the way the contract was structured, it provided the flexibility to adapt and grow. The program is designed to meet obligations under the Chesapeake Bay Total Maximum Daily Load. Again, focus on those nutrients and sediments, and also help the county achieve compliance with EPA's Clean Water Act. The program aims to meet these stormwater compliance requirements in concert with socioeconomic goals to help grow both the local economy and contractor capacity. So what do the water quality improvements look like on the ground? The Clean Water Partnership delivers design, installation, maintenance, and monitoring of green stormwater infrastructure. And those solutions range from bioretention to pond retrofits, to sand filters, to bioswales, to stream restoration and outfall protection projects. They extend across the entire county. So the map here delineates the county's boundary, almost 500 square miles, and the distribution of projects. I think it's worth highlighting the intentionality of equitable distribution of projects across many different municipalities that have come together on a regional basis to be part of this partnership. It's also worth highlighting that the projects are installed not only across many jurisdictions, I think there are 28 different municipalities, but they're also on various types of property. So we have government properties like public right-of-way and schools, parks, and also private properties at both the residential and commercial scale. So since March, here are just kind of the fast facts on the program. Since March of 2015, over 230 different projects have been implemented, managing over 4,000 impervious acres of stormwater runoff. As you can see from the map, the projects are installed across the county's 500 square miles. And again, for each and every one of these sites, a third-party inspection is completed to create a transparent process. And Maryland Environmental Services provides that inspection. The Clean Water Partnership Program, you look at these numbers and they tell the story in itself. It has elevated Prince George's County as a center of excellence for green infrastructure. The program has reduced the cost per treated impervious acre by about 30% when compared to the traditional delivery and how they were implementing green infrastructure before. The team has used a variety of strategies to accomplish this savings. There's also a tremendous economic impact that has been characterized by an independent study, an academic study by Towson University, to help understand the benefit for this investment on the county. And some of the things that Michael will talk about will really help you understand why that economic benefit is being realized as part of this program. So I wanted to just give you a glimpse at some of the strategies that we're implementing. The partnership has a variety of strategies. These are just a handful. Each of these have been standardized for the county. Typically, the strategies are site scale green infrastructure projects like pond retrofits or bioretention. There are also stream restoration projects and outfall protection. All of the projects align with the county's guidance on managing stormwater runoff from impervious acres. And that's how the credits and metrics associated with water quality are tracked. Those strategies implemented across that vast area have had a tremendous impact on water quality and are really helping the county advance compliance. So as part of the program, we track total anticipated removal of some key pollutants. These removal rates are based on the current devices that are in the ground that are treating runoff from those 4,000 impervious acres across the county. So it's a really quick glimpse at the water quality and the watershed-based outcomes. Another key priority for Prince George's County was figuring out how to advance economic impact and contractor capacity. And as I mentioned, Michael's led this effort since 2016. So I'm very pleased that he's here to join us and talk about those efforts.
So Edith spoke this morning when she kicked off the conference. She talked about three key things as it relates to their goals for the climate control action plan. And the first one was engage and educate the community, or maybe it wasn't first, but certainly one of the things that she talked about. Incorporate equity and inclusion and build capacity of your businesses in the community. So what I'm really going to talk about is the efforts that we use and what we've done to try to meet those goals, very similar to what the action plan says. And hopefully you'll be able to take some of the things that I say and use them in your communities. I know we're on the East Coast, but I think what we're doing and have been doing it for the last 6 years, it started out with a goal, and to meet those goals, here's some of the things that we've done. So let me talk a little bit about those. So first of all, outreach. In your markets, you have, well, let me talk about one of the things that happens. Typically, when you do large projects, a lot of times the bidding process, contractors come in from outside of your community, from outside of your municipality, or outside of your county, and the work is actually, and the workers come as well, where those contractors come in and they bring their people from other markets into your market and they do the work. So our goal here was to try to keep as much of the work in the county and in the local region that we could, and to do that on the backs of small, local, and minority businesses. I mentioned earlier that there was a 50% local small minority business goal, which is called target class. And if you obviously in your marketplaces, a 50% goal is a pretty high goal on a project like this. And then a 51% resident work hour goal. So we wanted to make sure that our residents were getting access to the work. And in doing that, we're creating long-term education. If we can get 51% of the people working on the projects in the community, if we can get 50% of the businesses in the community to do the work, we're actually educating as we go, and we've done that. So you can see the results there in terms of some of the things that we've done to do that. We have a mentor protege program for small businesses. Laura, I think if you go to the next slide. Here are metrics that demonstrate the work that's been done. So the target class goal of 50%, we're running about 80% on the target class goal. How do we do that? Basically, we do a lot of outreach and a lot of sourcing of small business. We have requirements for those small businesses to participate in the project. In our marketplace, we had small businesses that were doing excavation and doing some BMP installation, but not to the tune of what we're doing in this program with the metrics that we're trying to meet and understanding how to manage and maintain these types of projects. A lot of landscape companies we have are doing residential landscaping, but not necessarily clear about how to maintain a BMP. So we've put in programs to teach small businesses how to maintain BMPs. We've designed special courses for them. We have a mentor protege program that has had 40 firms come through the mentor protege program. One thing to note is all of our work is bid work. So the work is bid out. We have a team of general contractors that takes the designs, puts the work out to bid, and then the community businesses and small firms, they bid the work. So we're not giving the contracts to anybody. It is a bid basis. It is a best value bid. So we can look at the goals and the metrics that are associated not only with price, schedule, and performance, but also with local community involvement, minority and small business participation. All of those things create the best value for the program. Our contractor development program helps contractors get to the requirements that they need to bid on these projects. So if a contractor comes to us and says, hey, Michael, we want to bid this work, we look at their requirements. We do a registration and a qualification. We qualify those firms. We tell them what they need to do to be able to bid on these projects. Do they need an erosion and sediment control certification? Do they need the Chesapeake Bay Landscape Professional certification? Those kinds of things. And then we try to provide a pathway for those businesses to get to those types of certifications so that we can increase the capacity in our marketplace so that those businesses can then bid the work. And our ultimate goal is that the firms in our local community can bid the work in Prince George's County, but they're building capacity to bid that work outside of the county. And we've seen phenomenal results of firms that have started here in the Clean Water Partnership, whether they're veteran-owned, woman-owned, small business, minority businesses, and then they're able to go bid work in neighboring counties or neighboring communities. And those firms come back to the county where they live. Their employees come back to the counties where the county where they live, and the economic participation that they're able to do because of maintaining jobs through the pandemic, because of being able to work with 51% of the work hours staying in the county, has really been an economic boon for our county. The Mentor Protege program, while we've had 40 firms go through the Mentor Protege program, our program is a one-year program. We do training. We have we do a pilot project for the firms in the Mentor Protege program where only those firms in the Protege cohort can bid on one project. And we open up the bidding process for that project so that the firms learn how to bid. So they look at everybody's bid. We take the names off, but they can see the differences in what they thought excavation was versus what excavation really is in terms of the quantities and the takeoffs, native plantings, those kinds of things. So we're teaching the firms, again, how to build capacity. Of the 40 firms that have come through the Mentor Protege program, 20 of those firms have done over $30 million in contract work in the CWP, meaning they came into the Mentor Protege program, they actually bid work while they were in training or after training, and they actually won contract work to the tune of $30 million. And these are small businesses. We've had businesses to the tune of one person who hired relatives to do a small project, and they got the work done. One of the things that the CWP does is, because we're doing a community-based program, we are able to manage the requirements being schedule. So that if we know we have a small firm and this is their first project, we are aware of that. And given it's their first project, we're gonna make sure that our general contractor knows that, hey, this is the first time this person has done a project. So keep an eye on them, make sure they have all the safety requirements. If they need support, make sure you give them that support. And we may need a couple more days on the schedule to work with them. One of the other things that the program has done after the first phase was Corvius put in a fast pay program. Our contractors are getting paid, small businesses are getting paid within 3 to 4 weeks from invoice, which is almost unheard of in the construction industry. So they submit their invoice on day 1, and by day 30, they've pretty much got their check for that particular period. What that allows the small businesses to do, it allows them to mobilize, it allows them to cash flow the job. And once that happens, small businesses come to the program because they know and they hear in the marketplace that they're getting paid. It allows them to bid the work, have some assurance of getting paid, which allows the pricing to become more competitive because now they're bidding and they know they're going to compete with firms who understand that they're getting paid. And that's been another way that we've really helped build capacity in the community across all types of BMPs. We've done 55 projects at schools. When we do a school project, we work with the principals of the schools and we work with the students. Every school project, we set aside a planting opportunity for the students, so that we're teaching all the way for every project, from the GC to the small business down to the residents in the schools. So we're teaching the students how to do plantings. They're taking that information back home to their parents about, hey, we did a planting today, and guess what we learned about how to take care of native plants. So education is a part of what we're doing across the community. We've worked with over 150 HOAs in Prince George's County. And our residents, as you can see from this picture, when we're doing a stream or pond restoration, the residents come out, they want to know what's happening in their community, they want to be a part of it. And we want to make sure that we're handling, as most of you said in your presentations, that their concerns are our concerns as we build our project. So this has been a significant boom for community engagement. The participation has been just phenomenal across any program that we've seen anywhere in the country, not only in green infrastructure, but even in construction projects as well. And I've talked a little bit about the economic impact of local community impact for the work that we're doing in Prince George's County. So I don't know if there's anything else, Laura, that needs to be said. Maybe there's questions. I don't know. We pretty much have covered kind of the impact, how we do it. And so we're open to questions, Jan.
Great, Michael. Yeah, there are some questions. The first question is, how are you tracking and collecting the participation data at both levels for class and residents?
For all the projects, all of our contractors, all of our subcontractors have to report. They do a pre-plan report that shows how many residents they have working on the job. So if I bid a project as a subcontractor, I have to show that I'm using a 4-person crew, and of that 4-person crew, 3 of those people are residents of Prince George's County based on their location and their address. So we keep track of that. On the participation, they have to do the same thing with participation. They have to let us know that this firm is a local firm. They are a certified minority firm based on the target class requirements. They submit their certificates with the firms when they bid the work, and we track to make sure that the dollars associated with the project go to those specific firms. So we have a compliance team that tracks the compliance of every project so that we can make sure. We have to report that to the county both quarterly and annually. So we have to make sure that we can follow the track of the dollars, and the dollars went to the firms that are actually participating.
Oh, good.
Tagging on to that, something that I really appreciated about the partnership that I would just encourage anyone to go to is Google Clean Water Partnership online and check out the website. There's a dashboard that populates that type of information so that it's very transparent and you can see how the program is delivering on those goals.
Good. That's good information. And what I'll do too, I'll include that link too. When I send out the information to everyone, Clean Water Partnership, I'll send out the link so everyone has that information. The next question is, for the contractor development, what were the most effective ways for you to reach contractors to let them know about the program?
We have a team that's on the ground that has been working and doing outreach events for the last 6 years. When we started, we We got a list of all the local contractors in Prince George's County. We got a list of all the firms that were certified in the classes that the county goal were, and we did a mass mailing and an outreach to them and broadcast that we have projects coming. And basically through outreach events, I think you saw that there were 350 outreach events so far on the program. And we're constantly doing outreach. If we meet firms in the neighborhood, sometimes we give them a card and say, hey, you know, there's work over here, you know, give us a call, register with us. We have a registration, online registration that we have, but we actually have a team. Because this is an ongoing project and because it's a 30-year maintenance program, we're teaching small businesses how to be prepared to go after maintenance contracts as well, because the maintenance will go on. And the county's actually moving more projects from their inventory over to the Clean Water Partnership from a maintenance perspective. So the maintenance portfolio is growing as well.
Good. The next question is, what language are you using in the RFI to meet your percentage goals?
Language are we using? I think that means we're basically using the qualifications that come from the county that say you have to have 51% residents, you have to have 50% target class, and we actually identify what the target class is, which would be local business. Part of the local business has to be small. So there is a 50% of the local business has to be small business, and there's a minority business participation clause as well. We use veteran firms, women-owned firms, and then minority businesses, and all of that's in the language from the county. So we basically take the language from the county and put that in the agreement for every bid that we put out.
Laura, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, on that, I can't remember if this is the case in the Clean Water Partnership, but in other partnerships that we're working on together, we actually incentivize if a contractor, it's almost like giving extra points, right? If a contractor can make a proposal increasing the amount of disadvantaged business enterprise on their team. So that's another strategy that we've employed, just actually creating an incentive for the proposing team to maximize their utilization.
Good.
I think one of the biggest strategies is understanding what the marketplace capacity is. And we started very early trying to understand what our firms were capable of doing and where their handicaps were, so that we could address our protege and contractor development program around those specific areas that were challenges for small business. Those were financing, getting loans, those were acquiring equipment, those were how fast can they get paid. And when you focus on those things, then we put programs in place to facilitate, to fill those gaps, so that the small businesses knew. Bonding is another one, right? If it's over $1 million in our program, the project has to be bonded. So one of the things in the program was, for that first $1 million, the CWP provides the bond. So that allows a small business to get work and not have to bond it. And after they get 4 or 5 projects, they now have capacity or past performance to be able to show to the bonding agent, hey, I've got 5 projects that I've done. I've done about $800,000. Can I get a $250,000 bond? And if they got that bond, then they were able to increase that bond. The other thing that we did is we have a supportive services component of the program where we've hired firms that understand how to work with small businesses, and we use those firms to do support for the businesses. So their back office accounting, we have a CPA firm, we have an accounting firm that does QuickBooks in the Sky, we have a marketing firm that helps firms do website development. So we basically are trying to fill in the gaps for the small businesses, so we don't have any excuses. We move them through a program that actually supports them where they are, and then helps them get to a better place so that they can actually bid the work out. And sometimes we have small projects as well, which is another thing. Small projects are easier for small businesses to participate in. You know, it might be roof disconnects and a small bioretention. It's a $150,000 project. Well, that makes it easier for a small business to bid that kind of work.
Right. It's great experience for them to get started on their feet. And I think that mentoring program sounds great. Yeah, just to get them started and moving forward.
Absolutely.
The next question is, does the program have built-in performance criteria, especially for native plantings, to ensure both short and long-term sustainability of the retrofits?
I'm gonna let Laura answer that.
Yeah. So
Stay in my lane.
Thank you. Yeah, the key performance indicators that the county uses to measure success are very much tied to elements like the utilization that Michael's talked about, and then the broader impact of, a certain number of impervious acres being treated. So with each phase of the program, there has been an expectation or a goal to treat a certain number of impervious acres. The strategies are very site specific, but because there is that 30-year maintenance period that is tied to the program, everything that goes in is designed with long-term maintenance and survivability in mind. Because if it fails, the program has to pay for it. It is a performance-based delivery of green infrastructure that is influenced by not only the success of what's installed, but how the community is engaged in the installation process. So does that help provide some answer to the question?
Yeah, no, I think that was a good answer to the question. And right now we don't have any more questions. And I want to thank you. If that's it, I don't have any more information. I just thank you everyone for participating. Thank you, Laura and Michael. And it was great because Zoom is great because you're not in this area. So they were able to present from the East Coast and Midwest. And I really appreciate everyone that presented today. I thank everyone for participating. And Laura, I also have great stories about things found during river sweeps. I have a whole list that people would send me. It's just amazing what they find in the river and what people throw away. With that, I want to say thank you from the Conservation Foundation. Thank you to our sponsors, DuPage County Stormwater Management, Christopher Reed Burke Engineering, and Bedrock Earthscapes. And everyone have a great afternoon. I will be sending out this information, and great to see everyone. Thank you so much for helping and presenting. Appreciate it.